Hey, what is up, everyone? Welcome to this episode of the Essential NFL Podcast. My name is Stephen Clinton. I'm your resident data scientist slash film watcher, and got through all the Week One NFL film. Always an absolute blast to kick off the new season. See what all these teams and players look like after months of anticipating how it's all going to fit together. And it's a midday Friday, and taking a little bit of time to have my version of fun and just run through all the matchups of the upcoming weekend. And I'll go through what I saw on film the past weekend. Kind of my thoughts on that. I'll wrap up the show by talking about what I saw from Green Bay and Washington in Week One, and then obviously had the Thursday night game last night. Have not seen the tape of that yet, but I'll talk a little bit about what I saw in Week One and then some broad strokes from the way the game went. And we'll wrap up the show that way. So hopefully hit on some topics enjoyable to you. I'm gonna go game by game. For fantasy fans, I'll drop in player stat specific nuggets as we go here as they occur to me. But we'll hit it all. So have some fun here. So all right, cool. I'm just gonna go in the order that these games are sorted on this Vegas Insider I'm looking at right now. So all right. So first game for Week 2 of the NFL that's listed here is New England Patriots at the Miami Dolphins, and we've got plus 2.5 open for New England. That looks like it's getting down to plus 1.5, which that makes a lot of sense to me because when I was going through Miami's roster in the offseason, it hit me and it's important for context that I think that with the injuries they've sustained, Bradley Chubb and Jalen Phillips, even though certainly have been elite players in my book at times in their careers, suffering multiple serious lower body injuries does not help out any players in the NFL, even if some recover. So, have a very, tentative view of those players. Obviously hope the best for everyone, but just hard to count on that. And when I was looking at this Miami roster, I felt like the talent level honestly was almost as bad as it was in the tank for Tua year. And, obviously you try to counter that and steal me on the other sides of the argument and make sure that you're not getting too drawn into one narrative. But I'd say based on the first week of the film from the Miami Dolphins, the feeling was that it was the worst case scenario in terms of like this is the worst it could have looked. This Miami Dolphins team got absolutely crushed by an Indianapolis Colts team that, we'll talk about the Colts in more detail later. I certainly think their defense has improved, especially on the back end in Indianapolis. And Daniel Jones, I think, generally did a good job with what was presented to him. But I don't think that he was facing some, immensely difficult task against this Miami Dolphins defense that is just a sieve. It's hard to come up with another word for it. I think that they had their moments where they got pressure, but it was not consistent by any means. I thought that the Indianapolis line generally got the better of them, and then in the back end, it's as bad as you could have imagined it with guys like Storm Duck starting on the outside for them, and Cam Smith, second round pick from a couple of years ago, what is not even out there, that they just don't have players at the position. And then, Minkah Fitzpatrick was, back the Steelers defense that he played on after the trade from Miami. I think that's the best defense I've seen in the past, call it 6-7 years. I think that group was just unbelievable when you had, a much younger Cam Hayward, Stephon Tuitt, Javon Hargrave still on his rookie contract. Minkah really set that off as the free safety. So, he's a player I've always loved, but I just don't see an impact player there anymore. I don't think that he moves the same way that he did. I just don't think he drives on the ball the same way he did. So I think that, he's just not making a difference for them in the back end. Fadi Melifonwu, he has his moments where, he's just so over aggressive and he's just an inconsistent player. And then, you've got Jack Jones out there at the other corner spot, and, he was just all over the place. And then, the Dolphins wind up, throwing Rasul Douglas out there, who just, as Buffalo seems to have felt from moving on from him, it looks like Rasul Douglas is, best days in this league are behind him. And, so you have a front that has, some players in it, potentially, I like Zach Seiler a lot still. And, but there's just not enough here. And, you add into that, I think that doesn't seem like it's a locker room that's exactly banding together here. Continuing to have injuries along the offensive line, James Daniels, the veteran acquisition, who has had so many injuries, immediately goes out of this game at right guard. You see Austin Jackson getting, dealing with stuff again, and yeah, I just don't see how this is going to work out. I thought that on top of that, I thought Tua played just terrible, and it's too bad to see. I was not a big Tua guy, and Mike McDaniel and him really surprised me, especially out of the gate that year, and they seem to have found a formula that worked pretty well for them. But I think at this point, it's fair to say that that NFL has caught up with what they were rolling out year after year. They had 2 really good years of getting a great jump on everyone. I'd say the last 2 years that has not happened, and I think that this is a bad Miami team, and I think that on the flip side, watching that New England Raiders game, I thought that was a really competitive game, and that's often something that sticks out on Week 1 film, is that as you're flipping game to game, I mean, the disparity in the level of play between, say, Baltimore and Buffalo versus when you're watching, say, Carolina, Jacksonville. It's very clear that, even though only one team's going to get a win per game, the vast majority of the time, of course, it doesn't change the fact that, it's not like we've got the top 16 teams playing against the bottom 16 teams distributed equally, right? So, always important to keep in mind and difficult to sort through without really watching the film in these early weeks. But, I thought that Geno Smith and the Raiders had a great game. Geno lit it up downfield. They really took advantage of New England's second corner, Alex Austin, I believe it is. I keep wanting to say it's Alex Arma, but number 28, Alex Alex Austin. He was in for an injured Christian Gonzalez, and he had a really, really rough time of it. The Raiders definitely made a point of going after him. But then on the other side of the ball, I thought that the offense just, really kind of struggled to find any sort of rhythm. Max Crosby really got after them for sure. The left side of the line with the 2 rookies, Gerard Wilson from Georgia and then Will Campbell from LSU. They definitely had, some moments that were not ideal. Definitely saw some rookies at those positions across the league who played, I think, a lot stronger games in their debuts than Jared Wilson and Will Campbell. We'll see with those guys, obviously, long way ahead. I think Will Campbell's feet look good, but it does stick out just watching him on film, just how narrow that guy is in terms of his frame. Obviously, I'm looking at me on here, and he's not as narrow as me. It's hard to get much narrower. Turn sideways and turn invisible line, right? But like you look at Will Campbell and his frame versus every other NFL offensive lineman out there, and it just sticks out. He's just got a narrow frame, and so we'll see there. I thought Drake May generally had a good game. I thought that Stephon Diggs looked pretty good. First game back from injury, he slipped down at the goal line on a slant route. The conditions in this game between New England and Las Vegas definitely played a factor. But they were targeting Diggs in positions to get open as the on the ball ex receiver. Kayshon Boutte obviously had a big game for the Patriots in this one. But his game, in my opinion, hasn't changed at all. The guy can't separate at all, and he gets open sometimes. He's a good football player. He plays hard. He gets to the right spots. He blocks well, but he is just not going to generate any separation against man coverage. So while he had a good game in this one, I wouldn't count on that being the norm or the offense running through Kayshon Boutte. I just don't see any improvement from the player, and he's got a useful role in the NFL. I think that he'll play for a long time, but he's definitely a role player, and I think that even though the results weren't there in Week 1, I thought Diggs stuck out as the guy who is definitely got some more upside to handle more of a role moving forward. At the running back position, I think that even though TreVeyon Henderson didn't have any big huge plays in this one, I think you generally got what you wanted from him if you drafted him in fantasy this year. I think that he got a good workload. He caught the ball, I think, 6 times. He's regularly used in the screen game. He's going to get touches that way. So if you've got him in full PPR, he is going to rack up points that way, as most folks expected. Stevenson still carrying some of the load, but I think that TreVeyon Henderson's workload looks really good. for the Patriots' whole offense in fantasy, I think that this is a potential big bounce back week because this Miami Dolphins defense is just terrible. And I think that when you get into the second level, TreVeyon Henderson, I think, is a really interesting play this week because I think that breaking off a long game against the Miami Dolphins is by no means, a far-fetched possibility for a run game. So, yeah, I definitely, like the Patriots in this one to win outright, frankly, and the Dolphins are favored by, the 1.5 or 2.5 in some places. So, we'll see, but I think that the New England gets their first win under new head coach Mike Vrabel, and Miami takes one step further into disarray as things seem to be unraveling there. Jump into places where probably doesn't feel like it's unraveling because you got out with wins, but overall I'd say disappointing starts for the Jacksonville Jaguars and the Cincinnati Bengals. And we'll start with talking about the Jacksonville Jaguars. Similar to the Patriots Raiders game, you felt like conditions were playing into some sloppy ball in this Jacksonville Carolina game. So I think it seems like there were some intermittent rainstorms, and then they stopped the game for who knows how long, right? That's one nice thing about watching the film is it just clips right along, right? Right off the bat, Trevor Lawrence, tries to target Brian Thomas on a deep vertical route against Mike Jackson, which is a good matchup, and Lawrence just puts the ball very, very flat, easy pass breakup for Mike Jackson. They go back to Brian Thomas, he just flat out drops a fire screen. The rest of the game, I thought Thomas was fairly good despite the stat line, but if you go through the clips on Trevor Lawrence targeting Brian Thomas, there were just a bunch of Trevor sprays in those situations. And I don't think that is specific to Brian Thomas. He got a lot of targets, and Trevor sprayed a lot of balls in this game. He sprayed some balls to Travis Hunter as well. The balls to Brennan Strange happened to be, some of his better strokes. But I didn't think that it was, a player-specific issue. I just felt like Trevor was just hit or miss in this one. I think he's had games where he threw the ball a lot sharper. You see that a lot in week one. Just certain guys get out of the gate really fast, and other guys don't. And I didn't think that Trevor got out of the gate fast at all in this one, despite playing in a very advantageous matchup against a Carolina defense that, you talk about, Travis Etienne's production, and the Etienne brothers are going to mess me up. We had both Trevor and Travis with carries in that game between Carolina and Jacksonville. Obviously, Travis with the much bigger game really lit up that Carolina defense, and we saw Basil Tootin get after them a little bit as well. And then there was also, and this probably foretold Tank Bigsby getting traded, even though Bigsby did get some work in that Jacksonville game. I'm having to look the name up here, but there was another back who got a little bit of work on the passing downs earlier for Jacksonville. That was, LaQuint Allen Jr., the rookie 7th rounder. So a few names in the mix, but they cleared out the depth chart a little bit by getting Tank shipped off to the Eagles. But I thought ATM was really good, but Carolina's run defense looks like it has not improved one iota from last season. They got Christian Roseboom as kind of their primary linebacker there. They're, playing a lot of, reduced fronts. They do have like a lot of big bodies along that defensive line in Carolina, but, Derek Brown strikes me as the only really strong player. And then the back end, it was just not closing down. I didn't think that the safeties necessarily played great in that regard. Again, didn't think they got, a ton of help from the linebacker level. I do like, just watching Trevin Wallace run. He's very fast, and he ran down some things for them to prevent this being an even worse game. But overall, it was not a well put together game by that Carolina defense at all. They look to me like they're just going to be one of the worst units in the league again. I don't feel like it honestly changed a whole lot from last year. So, we'll see where it goes from here. But was not optimistic in it. So it was disappointing for getting back to the Jaguars that they didn't get out to a faster start. But there's a lot of talent on this offense here. I think that Brian Thomas is a really talented player. I've talked about that on the show before. I thought Travis Hunter looked great. He's just such an explosive player. He's got such strong hands. Good play instinct. So just look forward to seeing more of him. The O-line was fine in this game. I felt like for Jacksonville, all things considered. But again, I didn't feel like Carolina was giving them a heck of a lot of run for their money up front. I'm not a big fan of really any of these Jaguars offensive linemen. think any of them are, really above average players, but we'll see moving forward. And in terms of this matchup against the Cincinnati Bengals, it doesn't seem like it's going to matter at all. And actually, one thing that was in common between watching the Cleveland Browns on offense and the Jacksonville Jaguars on offense is that you were having drives where they were having just ridiculous numbers of penalties and getting backed up, and then they would just convert these and long situations. Like, there's no defense out there. I mean, Cleveland did it to Cincinnati, a couple, and you're going against a Cleveland offense that, the line is solid, but Jack Conklin went down hurt in this game, and and I think DeJuan Jones is just okay, and Joel Bitonio and Wyatt Teller are still out there, and they're positive players, but I think that they've certainly seen their best days before, and and the Cincinnati defense just can't do anything against them. I thought that the corners were terrible for Cincinnati, just kind of across the board, right? Like, I didn't feel like any of them stuck out as playing well, like whether it's Cam Taylor-Britt, Josh Newton starting the game. We saw some DJ Turner, you see all these guys, and I didn't feel like it was any better. I like Demetrius Knight a lot physically, the way he moves around and everything like that. Thought Chris Jenkins had a good rep against Joel Bitonio late, but I didn't feel like they consistently stood out. Obviously young guys, but and then I thought Logan Wilson had a good game in coverage. He had a couple plays that stuck out to me, but this is not like a leveled up defense, and Shamar Stewart. I didn't think that he had a particularly effective outing. So, we'll see. The flip side of it, the Cincinnati played a really good Cleveland defense, and that made it hard. They also had very limited opportunities because their defense could not get off the field. I mean, go look at Dylan Sampson's stat line for Cleveland. He's catching all these balls, and, you got... Yeah, so, that really limited Cincinnati's opportunities. That said, with everything invested in this offense, you would like to see them play better than they did. Myles Garrett took them over down the stretch. He is, much better player than Orlando Brown, who is not that big of a liability. He's not facing Myles Garrett, but man, Myles really lit them up down the stretch in this game. And, frankly, it's amazing that, between the almost safety that Joe Burrow took and, the missed field goal, it's kind of amazing that they won this game, right? And so we'll see moving forward. I think in this matchup, looking at how these teams match up against each other, I obviously, don't think that the Bengals have the defensive line in the front to impact what I think is a weaker Jaguars line. So I think that, Jacksonville's skilled players should be able to really shine in this one, and hopefully in what are supposed to be good conditions in Cincinnati. Trevor is sharper, and I would love to see a game like, I think it's 3 or 4 years ago now that he threw that, the game against Tennessee. I think it was 4 touchdowns, no interceptions, and one of probably my favorite Trevor Lawrence performance from start to finish, and big time throws and everything. And I'd love to see that in this game, and I think it's a good opportunity. And on the flip side, while Bryce Young was not able to operate against the Jacksonville Jaguars, and that's a different discussion we'll get to, but Bryce Young was really, really bad in my opinion. I did think there was room to work out there. I thought Tetairoa McMillan, Carolina's rookie receiver, was consistently open. Uncovering really well. Just didn't have the quarterback play to pay it off. Carolina's touchdown at the end was a cheapo, just a dump out to Chuba Hubbard in the flat, and then a missed tackle by the Jaguars with Eric Murray rolling up, but it is a missed tackle by the Jaguars in the flat that goes for a 30-yard explosive and a touchdown. So, they had a good result against Carolina, and I do think the defense is improved. I thought that a lot of the principles that came over, it looks like a Jeff Hafley or a Brian Flores defense at times with the changing of the picture and some of the things that they're doing. And, I want to see it's Anthony Pampanelio. I'm looking up the name right now to make sure I get it right, but, it took me a minute, but I'm almost sure he was the Packers linebackers coach last year, and you definitely saw that influence in my opinion. But I do like the players up front. I thought Josh Hines-Allen had a good game. He's going up against Yoshi Nijman quite a bit for Carolina, with Ika Mekwonu sidelined for them at left tackle. That was a good matchup for them. Eric Armstead looked much better playing 3 techniques, started impacting the game early. So I think there were a lot of good things, but I think that the back end is still just a problem. And yeah, so it's Anthony Campanelli who is the defensive coordinator for the Jacksonville Jaguars, and yeah, he was with the Packers last year with Jeff Hafley, so as their linebackers coach. And running game coordinator. So this is his first year as a coordinator. Say out of the gate, I liked what he did. I like the way that he uses the players he has. Dennis Gardeck showing up there and being like kind of an overhang edge player. That was where I kind of felt like there was that Flores influence in terms of that, like, kind of hybrid edge player. The way Andrew Van Ginkel is deployed. I think that Dennis Gardeck is kind of that player light. They came out the way they came out too was interesting, like right in the base defense for Jacksonville. They played basically a bear front, right? And they had Arik Armstead as one of the three techniques. They had Devon Hamilton on the center as the nose. And then Trayvon Walker, they take advantage of his size and versatility. They kick him in to play guard there. And so they were in a tilted 4-3 look where basically Josh Hines-Allen and Dennis Gardeck are the two edge defenders in that case. But with that same personnel, they could kick to a more traditional 4-3 look where they move those guys along the line to, a shade 3 alignment and then have Hines-Allen and Trayvon Walker on the ends there. And then have Gardeck as just your Sam Backer in that look. And, it's, we live in an NFL where the lines between those fronts have gotten more and more blurred, and people expect versatility, but I think that this group is well set up for that versatility. It really comes down to the back end, though. Like, I think that they are weak when Jerry and Jones is out there at corner in the nickel. They're starting, Tyson Campbell and Jordan Lewis in base. I think those guys are okay, but not dominant. I do like Tyson Campbell as like a plus player, but not more than that. And I think Andrew Wingard and Eric Murray are average at safety at best. As I mentioned, Eric Murray with the missed tackle that led to that huge play. So all this is to say that, if Tet McMillan's getting open against this defense and there's opportunities and Bryce Young's making some plays in the second half, I think that the Bengals are going to find plenty of ways to make plays. I think that you're going to have an offense that is ready to get uncorked after the way they were bottled up against the Browns in what must have been a very frustrating game. And I think that Cincinnati's still really talented on offense. So I think that this game has a very good chance of being a shootout. The total on this game is I don't have total right there, but hang on. Total's at 49. I like the over in this one. Not going to get into my model numbers for every game, but I do have a higher number on this. This is my highest total of the week with the matchup, and I think that hopefully the Jags are sharper on offense because there was a lot left on the field last week in terms of what they could have executed, even with the blowout win. They could have gotten a lot more, and I think that there was a lot of stuff that was really encouraging in terms of the design of the offense and how this could all come together. But we're going to need to put balls on target and make routine catches and make routine plays look routine. And but I think that the fact that I'm saying that is a really positive thing for the Jaguars, that they get the win. There's all those things, and there's still very clear room for improvement. Just within that game. So I'm excited for that one. That'll be a fun one. Well, all right. Next up works well. We were just talking about the Cleveland Browns. So the Cleveland Browns at the Baltimore Ravens. We got minus 11.5 spread, minus 12.5 at some places, and then the total of 45.5. And I don't have much of a stance either way on this game. In terms of fantasy players, Dylan Sampson is certainly an interesting player for full PPR. But it's complicated because Quinshon Judkins is going to come back and get in the mix. But we didn't see very much Jerome Ford at all. So Sampson, at least for now, if he were in this situation, it'd be a good spot because it's not a bad line for Cleveland. They've got some talent on this team. Jerry Jeudy's obviously a talented receiver. Njoku played well. I really liked Harold Fannin, talking about these rookie tight ends. I think that, you look at Harold Fannin as a big slot receiver, right? And he fits right in, and he's, brings explosiveness and everything like that. And, sometimes we talk about a big slot receiver, and it's like, well, you got a big slot receiver, but you've got the slowest, least explosive slot in the league. And, I don't think Harold Fannin is that. I think that he brings some juice and some size. He's going to be a different kind of blocker, so you can use him interesting ways that way. So, yeah, I thought that he looked really good. That to me was a big positive for Cleveland in this game, was his performance. So, I enjoyed that. It's not a good Cleveland Browns team, but I would say that, and the Saints fit in this regard too. I would say that they are just, they are a tough team to play against. Cleveland's got a very good defense. Myles Garrett was, surprise, surprise. Myles Garrett turned in an elite performance, right? Like who's counting the games on? I thought Greg Newsome was pretty good. I thought that Denzel Ward was very good in this game. And then I loved Carson Schweitzer at linebacker. Absolutely loved him. Loved the physicality. Loved the instincts. Enjoyed everything about it for a rookie linebacker in his first game. You just see so few guys with great instincts in this day and age, and I thought that Schweitzer, definitely checked those boxes. So, for a Cleveland team that's really looking, probably down the road a year here, I think there were a lot of positives to build on. That said, there is a reason that this game is lined at 11.5, and that's because the Ravens looked damn near unstoppable until the football gods were not on their side. It seemed like in that rally for Buffalo, and say what you will about and obviously Josh Allen had a lot of great plays along the way. The pass that Keon Coleman ends up catching in the back of the end zone. My take on that was that Josh Allen was trying to throw that ball to Khalil Shakir, and it's Dawson Knox who jumps up and tips it, and you see one defender is closing on Khalil Shakir, and then the ball goes flying past both of them to Keon Coleman, and sometimes it's better to be lucky than to be good, right? But same time, I think that reacting to Baltimore collapsing in that game as if there's like a fundamental flaw with the team is just like taking this to a little bit of an extreme. It's a tough game, and they played a back and forth game, and they're right there, and these are coin flip games, and they didn't win this one. And it's not as if Baltimore has never ever won a close game or beaten a good team. So, I think that you can definitely get lost in the narrative sometimes and overreact to things. I think that Baltimore overall looked really, really good. Derrick Henry, it looks pretty good at his age, right? I thought that Zay Flowers was fantastic. I thought that on the offensive line they had a really good day. I thought that Andrew Voorhees, he wasn't perfect, but I thought that he integrated well with that offensive line, and they're not going to skip a beat on offense. I'm missing Isaiah Likely this game, but honestly, hard to notice. They, just roll in the next guys, and they've got so much talent on this team. On the defensive side of the ball, I think that we saw, especially late in the game, that the corner spot is going to be something to sort out. I guess that they can join the Philadelphia Eagles in that regard, where the outside corner spot is something they're going to have to keep working through. I thought that Jair Alexander in particular had a tough time down the stretch in that game against the Buffalo Bills. But at the same time, a lot of positives for the Ravens. I thought Malachi Starks generally played well, showed good instincts. I thought Roquan Smith had some really nice plays. Thinking of him covering a seam in particular early in the game. Kyle Hamilton was doing his thing. I thought that Matabuke had a good game up front, productive. But the guy that stuck out even more is he's been coming on for some time now is Travis Jones. I think that Travis Jones, just the presence against the run. I really thought that it was fun to watch at Travis Jones going against Connor McGovern early in that matchup, and just Connor McGovern's a center I really like. I thought that the Bills, who have a very good line, played a really good game in this one, up front, but Baltimore certainly got their punches in going the other way. So, we'll see, but yeah, I expect the Ravens to come out and get their revenge in this one. But it's a division game in the AFC North, and while I do like the Ravens a lot more, I think the Ravens are as talented as anybody in the NFL. I also don't know that I would want to play an 11.5 point line, and I certainly wouldn't want to get into the totals world when you have a Ravens offense that can be as explosive as it is at times, and but then at other times, and a Cleveland defense that's good and a Cleveland offense that doesn't bode well for over. So yeah, I would stay away from that one. But it'll be interesting to see how the rookies continue to play out in Cleveland, and then for the Ravens, just expect them to keep humming along here. All right. So flip from the AFC North over to the NFC East, where we've got a grudge match between the Giants and Cowboys, and well, it looks like Rams Titans is up next. So this is perfect in terms of this stack because, man, you talk about contrasting how the same formula can look so different for a defense, right? And what I'm referring to here is the Giants and the Rams, I would say, are two examples of teams that it's the defense should be dominant up front, and the hope is that you wind up with an above average to good unit because you get so much pressure with the front, and that allows the back end to do a lot of things. And ironically, I think that of both of these teams, probably the best player in either back end in terms of off-ball linebackers and secondary players is probably Bobby Okereke. And I know that I probably got the wrong pronunciation of the name there, so apologies. But I think he's probably the best player of the bunch on both sides. I don't really like a whole lot of players in the back ends of the secondaries, but the Rams, turned it together against Houston, and absolutely, destroyed them and wrecked the game. And Washington's line is certainly better than Houston's, but the Giants didn't even come close to doing that. And whereas the Rams, played well enough in the back end of their defense, thought the Giants somehow, they were just, worse than what the sum of the parts should be in the back end. I thought that they looked really overmatched in this one in the back end of the defense for the Giants against Washington. And obviously, Washington wasn't incredibly prolific, but the game would have looked a little bit different if that ball gets dropped into Terry McLaurin instead of going a yard over him or whatever. And I think that they could have opened it up. And, more importantly, I would say that I felt throughout the game that Washington against the Giants, they were just in control. I thought Washington's offensive line played very well, and there were certainly moments that Abdul Carter showed up, that Brian Burns showed up. Brian Burns had a couple of really nice moves welcoming Josh Connerly to the NFL with just some hand-fighting techniques. And, yeah, Abdul Carter, the dude damn near blocked a punt against Washington, and then, watching him line up over the nose and go after guys. He's a monster, and he's going to be a really good player. He is a really good player, but it just, it felt like it was less than the sum of its parts. And, maybe part of that is just the belief in the offense because, Russell Wilson looked like Russell Wilson again. And, we had the play against the Steelers last year where he tried to scramble in and Ardarius Washington forces the fumble. And, similar thing happens in this game where Russ is trying to scramble down near the goal line. He just gets, instead of scoring, gets lit up and he loses the ball. And, it's just, I don't know. I don't believe in him watching him. And, they're just not really executing a whole lot in terms of concepts on time. Like, Russ never added that to his bag. We'll flip to the other side and talk about a quarterback who has just gotten better and better at all the stuff from the pocket. More advanced to start. But Russ has not added that to his bag. And the Giants' offensive line stinks, so this offense is just not much fun to watch. When they get Andrew Thomas back, that would help some, but that's one lineman, and they are not good at any of the spots on the line right now. It's John Runyon and is I think very average at the one guard spot. I think John Michael Schmitz is a liability at times at center. I think Greg Van Roten looked rough in this game. Van Roten is getting up there in the years. He's been a journeyman throughout his career, and I think he had one really good year. I want to say it was in Carolina 5-6 years ago where I thought that he had by far his best season, but he hasn't been close to that since. And then so you bring it all together. You've got a Luminor out there at right tackle who's not a world beater by any means, and it's just not a very good look on offense. And, I thought that, it's hard to believe in these running backs as a result. I just don't think the Giants are going to score a whole lot of points. And I don't, think that throwing Jackson Dart out there is necessarily the solution, because this is not like some great infrastructure to drop him into, regardless of whether or not Malik Nabers is one of your receivers and one of the best receivers in the league, which he is. But that doesn't do it all in the NFL, right? You don't win games just because you have a good receiver. And I thought the Giants looked very bad, and it was not encouraging to see their defense do so little and the defensive line not impact the game more against Washington and the Commander, or Washington and Jaden Daniels. you would have hoped for more from that group because they've invested so much up front, and they just have to get more. Especially because these guys are talented. It's not like they're missing on these players, right? Like, but it has to be more. The sum has the whole has to be more than the sum of the parts, and it just wasn't there. And now that they're going to face a Dallas offense that they probably don't match up against very well. Now, they should have a big advantage on the offensive line. I thought Tyler Booker was just okay in his in getting started in the NFL. I thought that we saw Tyler Guyton continue to have some of the issues he had last year with angles and stuff like that at the left tackle position. Tyler Smith's a monster at left guard, but with kind of the issues with Guyton, with Booker not being like a stud right out of the gate, and then Terrence Steele, there are definitely some holes. So I can see where the Giants' defensive line, again, getting back to them, if they're they need to make their mark this week against the Cowboys in the way that the Eagles did. In a lot of gotta-have-it situations in that Eagles-Cowboys game, you had, Nolan Smith stunning and coming home. You had Jalix Hunt having his moments in that game. I thought that Jordan Davis played his best game of his career for the Eagles against the Cowboys in Week 1, and then Zach Bond added a big impact as well. So there's a lot you can do. But, they really need to get after him because I think that the Cowboys, have a significant advantage in terms of Dak Prescott slinging the ball to his guys against this Giant secondary that I don't like very much. I think that Cowboys receivers have a big advantage over guys like Paulson Adebo, who I didn't think stood out at all. Guys like, Deontay Banks, when he's out there, Cordell Float was playing quite a bit. I think that, Dallas should be able to take advantage of them. And, CD was certainly getting open in that game. Obviously, some tough drops for CD Lamb against the Philadelphia Eagles in that game. But, I thought Dak Prescott played outstanding. I mean, threw the ball as well as I think he's thrown it in a couple of years. Just laser after laser early on, despite some pressure and everything like that. What I found very disjointed for Dallas as it went down the stretch was they didn't want to involve George Pickens. And, early in the game, Pickens was being covered by Quinyon Mitchell from the Eagles. And that makes sense to stay away from that matchup because it wasn't going great outside of the pass interference that they did draw. Quinyon just does a good job against Pickens. But as the game went on, Quinyon started following CeeDee Lamb around. And there was generally extra attention being paid to that matchup by the safety to that side of the field. And Pickens was going up against Adoree Jackson, and, Dak was not really looking his way. I would for sure say that one play that might have contributed to this is if you go back to the play before Miles Sanders fumbles for Dallas. The Cowboys are going into the red zone, and George Pickens is asked to crack block the safety Reed Blankenship on the play. And he comes across to him, and I mean, he pulls like a martial arts, MMA kind of move. I'd say, a little bit of maybe jujitsu to the way that he was torquing him down, but he catches Reed Blankenship across the head, out of engages him and then sidesteps him, catches him around the head. There's a place you can freeze it on film where Pickens is behind Blankenship at this point. He's got his arm across his face, and then at that point he yanks his head out and his feet out from under him, and he puts Blankenship on the turf, and he gets called for 15 yards in unnecessary roughness. And, you're supposed to be blocking that guy, and the team is driving into the red zone, and I don't know if he and Blankenship were talking shit to each other or what, or why George Pickens did that, but, if you're part of a team and everybody's working and trying to squeeze out a victory here, that's really hard to deal with. Because, that's just George Pickens being George Pickens and being worried about George Pickens and not what that action is going to do for the team on that drive. And so I didn't see anything in his play because I thought he was uncovering against Adoree Jackson late in the game. And that was the other part of it is that, Dak is trying to, continue to go to CD and attack a more difficult matchup. And I thought that Pickens was uncovering sometimes. So that, to me, felt weird. And it changed during the game. And again, the thing that stuck out to me by far the most was the penalty. And, it's, one of those moments where that's just it's not being accountable to your team. So we'll see. I was really excited about the fit of Pickens and CeeDee Lamb playing together on paper. I thought that Brian Schottenheimer, from an offensive coordinator perspective, did a really poor job of integrating those two. Also, I thought you would see a lot of stacks with CD and Pickens together, working different levels on drive concepts, run snag concepts together, which is obviously, an offshoot of drive where you're just optioning it and running the dig behind. But, all that sort of stuff. I thought that duo would be fantastic at that, with CD running the underneath change of direction routes. I mean, shoot, you think of running like, a pivot drive route where CD starts coming inside, whips outside, and then Pickens is coming in behind. You could do that in reverse with Pickens running the out and CD coming back inside. Like, in theory, with how good those guys run levels at those respective levels of the field, it should work really well. But I didn't, and I could be wrong. I'm not charting every single play and writing down what they did, but like there were other games, for instance, the Chargers, watching the way that Greg Roman and their offensive staff integrated Ladd McConkey with Keenan Allen, using them interchangeably as the slot and the Z receiver and working them together, and those two working switch releases together and stuff like that. And that's how Keenan Allen popped loose on the drop coverage in the Kansas City game. And so, I thought that just comparing those two, and I watched those games, of course, back to back, with it being Thursday night, Friday night, I thought the Cowboys didn't integrate Pickens and CeeDee Lamb together very well at all. So, it was a weird game. So I think there's a lot of questions to be answered on both sides of this Dallas offense versus Giants defense matchup. Dak Prescott and CeeDee Lamb, I'd say, are not two of them. Tyler Smith's awesome. I hope we get to see him against Dexter Lawrence a good bit. But yeah, it was it'll be an interesting one. So yeah, no super strong takes on the games there, I guess. But yeah, it was lot to break it down in those games. And yeah, on the positive note, it was definitely fun to watch Dak play, and that part should be fun in this game as well. Moving on to Rams Titans. So yeah, talking about the Rams, obviously their defensive line is lights out again. I mean, Jared Verse came to play, Byron Young came to play, all of those guys, Kobe Turner stood out at times. I mean, I just really enjoy watching that front get after it. They're going against a Houston Texans offensive line where, you obviously try to have some optimism about the moves they made and the reshuffle going into the game. But, by the time you're partway into the second quarter, it's like, this seemed like kind of a pipe dream, putting this group together, like a bunch of cast-off veterans and later drafted guys. And yeah, it worked that way. I mean, they were terrible. They're getting C.J. Stroud killed by this Rams defense. I thought C.J. Stroud still had moments where he shows how good he is. Ironically, started to remind me of some of the situations Matthew Stafford was in with the Detroit Lions, where you had people legitimately, just asking, how good he is. And I get it if you're a fan and you're not watching the film, because I used to ask all the same questions, and you just wonder because you can't see it on the broadcast and putting it all together. But C.J. Stroud, for a guy that's getting hit that much and under duress, I thought he made tons of plays. But flipping it back to the Rams, obviously, the defense is going to continue to heat guys up. It's going to be a lot harder against the Tennessee Titans. I turned on the Tennessee Titans film against the Denver Broncos expecting to be really disappointed with the Denver Broncos. Came away totally other way. The assumptions were very wrong there. The first thing is that Cam Ward is an NFL quarterback. We're going to talk about the Chicago Bears later. Everything that Caleb Williams is struggling with comes naturally to Cam Ward. I mean, this guy from the first drop back, it's just so apparent. He sees the field so well. The play style is not comparable to either of these guys. So it's like, but Joe Burrow and Justin Herbert are two guys that really stick out to me as guys who, like, and Andrew Luck would be a guy like this, although Andrew, it was more the second half than the first half of his first game. They stuck out to me as guys who just like came out and just from the get-go, like the drop on day one, they had it, right? Whereas, like, you can talk about like the different curves. Like, it's not easy, right? We saw that with J.J. McCarthy, who we'll talk about later the other night. It took him a few quarters to get going, right? Cam Ward, it was not like that at all. And, I thought Denver had such a good matchup, especially because you look at Tennessee's receiver room and it's Calvin Ridley and a bunch of other guys. And I figured Pat Surtain would completely take Calvin Ridley away. And that happened. And Cam Ward was still not phased. And, he does have a good offensive line in front of him in Tennessee. Now, certainly we had moments where, you'd have Nick Benito getting after Dan Moore especially. And you get reminded that, Dan Moore is hopefully going to be the weakest player on this line for the Titans. But while he was in the game, I thought J.C. Latham was awesome in the run game. And had a couple moments in pass protection he can get better at. But I really hope he's healthy. He left the game in the fourth quarter for the Titans, but Latham was a monster in the run game. Zeitler looked really good, playing right guard, as always, late mid-30s and still rolling along. I thought Lloyd Cushenberry looked fairly good coming back from a major leg injury, and then Skoronski seemed to have a solid day. So they've got a very solid front there in Tennessee. So, the Rams are not going to have such easy pickings this week, but, and for the Titans, I mean, they just faced the Broncos, and, the back end of this Rams defense is not the back end of the Broncos defense. So, yeah, this is going to, as good as the Rams are on the defensive line, this is going to be, this might feel like it's, moving at 90% speed after that Broncos defense, and having Calvin Ridley hopefully available as more of an option in this game. And, the Titans had a lot of drops in this game. That was the other thing. And Cam Ward, like a couple of them, ball placement could have been a little bit better. There's some gray area in drops. So there were a bunch where, not really. And then, Iona Moore lands on the sideline on that great ball up the sidelines, and they don't challenge it. So all that to say, there were a lot of things going against the Titans in this one. The other part of it, and this is going to be very important in this game, for everything positive I just said about Cam Ward, you cannot go backwards when you get pressured in the NFL. Lamar Jackson gets himself into trouble doing this still, but like in this week's Baltimore-Buffalo game, Lamar gets in trouble once, but then he escapes another time and runs for a lot of yards. Cam Ward's a very good athlete. I think that he's a really instinctual football runner. What I mean when I say that is like, you can be a good straight line sprinter, you can have good agility, but like if you don't have good timing on a football field, none of that matters, right? Like you have to, move around the defender and move your, all this is, I think, obvious, but like it's very easy to overlook that point sometimes when you talk about guys as a runner on a football field. And I think that Cam Ward, played a lot of option quarterback, I think, at his first stop in college or maybe high school. So you saw that. I thought that he looked very comfortable slipping in space, just having that awareness. But he can't go backwards on these sacks like this. I mean, it's a big part of the reason the Titans lost this game. They were right in it with Denver, and on one drive in particular, Cam starts retreating. He ends up losing 15 on a sack instead of 7, and then he does it again, and they end up losing like 24 yards on the drive, and it just can't happen. And the good thing is that the game's not looking like it's too fast for him. These are learning opportunities, right? Just understanding that your athleticism's not getting you out of some of these ones in the NFL. He is gonna make some plays out of structure and everything, but he also needs to have a better feeling for when to limit the defense or the damage. The other flipping the ball around, and I'll wrap this side. I'm just really excited to watch Cam Ward continue to play here. I think we'll see what the talent's like around him, but the quarterback is so good, and he throws the ball so easy from flexible arm angles, great accuracy, easy velocity. I thought he saw, as I say, the field really well. Yeah, I think the Titans hit an absolute home run with this Cam Ward guy, and it'll just be really fun to see where it goes from here, because there's been so many good athletes, good throwers of the ball coming into the league who, the how to play the quarterback position is just a continued struggle and takes years in some cases, and Cam Ward came in and did that very naturally and very well from the get-go. So very enjoyable. Flip side of this, Titans defense I think is salty. I thought that Jeffrey Simmons was awesome, and he's been an elite player in my books for years, but great start to the year. T'Vondre Sweat still a monster in the middle. I thought that L'Jarius Sneed was good for them in this game before he went out. I thought it really hurt them when he went out. Darrell Baker is just not the same player. I thought Jarvis Brownlee played a really competitive game on the outside as well, and I thought Amani Hooker balled out. Just justified the contract he got there for the Titans. Played a good game in their back end. So I think there's a lot to like here in Tennessee. I think there's even more to like when you look at the 2 to 3 year outlook. I don't think it's unreasonable to say that they're the most complete team in the AFC South right now. And I think that the quarterback, he and CJ Stroud are the two most talented quarterbacks in the AFC South. And I obviously said positive things about Trevor Lawrence earlier, but CJ Stroud, Cam Ward, actually CJ Stroud might be a good, and CJ had a little bit more trouble right out of the gate. If you go back to the very beginning of his rookie year before it really clicked for him and he took off, for Cam, I think the sky's the limit. So it'll be fun. Flip side of it,
I mean, rumors of Matthew Stafford's demise have been greatly exaggerated. I thought he threw the hell out of the ball on Sunday, threw as well as anyone in the NFL. His completion off action down the sidelines to Xavier Smith right after that sidearm dig to Devontae Adams across the middle early in the second half. I mean, he looks like the same old Matthew Stafford to me. The Texans defense is nails. They were coming all game. Will Anderson is awesome. Danielle Hunter is awesome. Yeah, they've got great players out there. I thought Azeez Al-Shaair was all over the place. I mean, the fumble he causes at the end of the game as the Rams, nearly put it away in a bigger fashion. I mean, Shaair hammered, on that hit. So, I think that, this Rams offense, that's, about as hard of a matchup as they are going to see all year. I thought that Devontae had some drops and some struggles early and really turned it on late. I thought he was phenomenal. I thought Puka Nacua, freaking awesome. Freaking awesome. I mean, Devontae saw a lot of Stingley with the way they ended up playing this, and he ended up getting the best of Stingley several times. Nacua was seeing more Lassiter's side of the field, and, I just thought Puka was awesome. Obviously enjoyed what the Rams did on offense. We'll see them still continue to work things along the offensive line. They've got some things to sort there. They're not elite at the end of the day, but they are good enough, and so should be a really good deal between those two. If I were betting this game, I would for sure take the Titans with the points. I think that they should probably be closer to maybe Tennessee getting 3.5 at home, maybe 4. I think that they're a hard team to play against. I think that they've got a really good quarterback. I don't think that what happened against Denver was a fluke by any means. And, while Denver made some mistakes in that game, I thought that, they were very lucky to get out of there with a win. And I think that if they were playing Cam Ward in week 5, Cam Ward's probably not making those types of mistakes he made anymore, and the Broncos could very well have lost that game. So, I think the Titans are a very real team this year, and I don't think that they've got quite the roster talent to push for a Super Bowl yet, but I think that they're building in the right way, and their 3-year launch path, 4-year launch path on this rookie contract is it looks fantastic. I don't know how you could not be excited. So, All right, moving along to the Buffalo Bills and the New York Jets. So, let's start with the good of the Buffalo Bills. Offense is still really good. Offensive line, I thought, looked awesome. They had some battles with certain players from the Ravens. The Ravens have some good players up front. Still think that Deion Dawkins, David Edwards, Connor McGovern, Cyrus Torrence, and Spencer Brown are really good. I thought Spencer Brown, to me, just keeps getting better. Deion's I think he's my favorite in terms of just his style of play, offensive lineman to watch, just him. Deion Dawkins pulling is a lot of fun. Let's put it that way. I thought those guys were great. I thought James Cook looked like James Cook, adds that explosive element to the offense. Almost had a couple of long touchdowns. Did get the one, got taken down at about 50 yards on the second carry. But that all looks good. I think that they've got plenty of weapons at receiver. Keon Coleman, all the production. I was really excited to watch this game, to watch Keon Coleman. I would say his production fell more under the heading of a Quentin Johnston production or a Kayshon Boutte production, where he is out there a lot. This is a really productive offense. He's going to make plays. What I said about Kayshon Boutte, about him not separating Keon Coleman, same thing. Still not to me getting very much separation at all. But he does a good job with his size. He's got his skill set. I don't think that there are going to be a lot of games where he catches a 25-yard touchdown pass or whatever it was after Dawson Knox tips a pass up, as I obviously already described. But he's a good player, and he fits into what this Bills offense is all about, which is still the Josh Allen and what he brings to the table. Threw the ball brilliantly in this game. No quit in the guy, right? Just no quit. Just continues to compete to the last whistle. Josh Allen's been an absolute joy to watch over his career. Can only say positive things. I think that you still have kind of the same group around him. Dalton Kincaid did not suddenly become a super explosive athlete to me overnight, but he's got his role. Dawson Knox has his role. They got a lot of pieces. Ty Johnson almost caught a touchdown in this game on a deep wheel route. So I think it'll be a lot of the same for Buffalo on offense, and they should be really successful again. On defense, thought Ed Oliver was outstanding. And I, generally graded Ed Oliver as more of a plus player than an elite player, just because, I feel like he gets pushed around sometimes at his size, and it's more about knifing in and not like consistent dominance, like say a Leonard Williams, what he did this past week. But I thought Ed Oliver played a really good, really physical game in this game. I thought he was by far their best defender, made a bunch of big plays for them. Very disappointed he'll be out this week. Beyond him, I don't know, man. I like Christian Benford, but it's that safety tandem with Taylor Rapp and Cole Bishop is just not it. Watching those guys bounce off Derrick Henry, which is obviously a tough tackle, but like that's a small, and I know Cole Bishop has like measurables and everything, but he just doesn't look like a big time athlete on the field to me. And then I think that Taylor Rapp is a below average player and kind of always has been. I think he's got good football IQ, but like he's just not a physical specimen out there, and that makes life difficult. Linebacker Matt Milano used to be one of my very favorite players in the league. Blue player in my book as an elite player, just not there after the injuries, and then I don't think Tyrel Dotson was great next to him in this game. So like obviously they found a way to hold on. I thought they did a better job of setting a picket fence against the run in the second half to keep Derrick Henry contained, but that now they go up against this Jets offense that it brings another quarterback with a big run element and another physical line, and I don't think Buffalo is equipped to play against this. They want to sit in their big nickel the entire game. They've got Teron Johnson, who's a baller in the slot, but is not a big guy, right? You're playing a pure nickel, in pure corner nickel version of nickel, right? We're not playing big nickel here. We're not subbing in a safety and bringing in somebody who's stouter against the run. So you really need to shine in that front. And I, thought Joey Bosa had his moments and everything. But with the linebackers, what they are, with the safeties tackling so poorly, I just don't think that they're well structured to play the structure that they want to play on defense. And I think it'll be a problem again this week because, man, Justin Fields looked really good last week. And, with Justin Fields, if anybody's ever questioned his athleticism, I would not put a whole lot of stock in their opinions on this stuff, right? We've been watching Justin Fields fly by NFL defenders for years. We've been watching him make great highlight reel throws. It's always been the consistency down to down in the operation of the passing game. We'll talk about Caleb Williams in the next game, another good allusion to him. Justin is improving in that. I thought that this game was his best game in all of those things. Like all the things he needs to work at, I thought he was better at in this first game for the Jets. I love talking about these guys because, the world is so quick to dismiss all these guys. Sam Darnold, we'll get to him later. Geno Smith, we already talked about. Baker Mayfield, all these guys got, thrown out with yesterday's garbage, and they just keep going, keep persevering. And, I think that Justin Fields is finally in an offense that is built really well to his specifications. In terms of talking about, just as a quick aside, about Detroit offensive minds, I thought that Tanner Engstrom did a way better job tailoring his offense to what Justin Fields does well than Ben Johnson did with Caleb Williams, who, we're about to get to that. The Jets do not have a lot of talent at receiver outside of Garrett Wilson. Didn't let it bother them. They worked a really, a pass heavy game, or their pass game plan was heavy inside the numbers, right? The big shot up the middle to Mason Taylor. They hit Garrett Wilson a ton, but they're not. They don't have great talent at the receiver depth positions, but they're not asking those guys to make a ton of plays, right? And then the running backs look great. I mean, Breece Hall looked really, really good in this game. You add in the element that Justin Fields brings against the run, how good he is in the red zone, his ability to finish down there, and how hard they are to defend. This is a good group. And then the offensive line was very good in this game. Even without Elijah Vera Tucker available to them, I thought that it ended up working fine. They reshuffle Josh Myers, the free agent acquisition depth. This guy played 4 years for the Packers. And, while I never thought he was making the Packers offense, I never felt like Josh Myers is just some terrible player who's derailing them, right? Better against the run than the pass. But, hey, not a perfect player. We don't make football teams out of perfect players. I thought Josh Myers was good. I thought Tippmann slid over to right guard and was good. Loved watching Armand Membu's first game. Getting back to Will Campbell, I would have been a Membu guy in this draft, just looking at the physical traits and what I think that means for their respective ceilings. I thought that Membu was really, really good in this game. I thought Fashanu was good in this game. they're going to have a game plan that is, very conducive to good offensive line play. They're going to be running a lot. Justin Fields is going to create hesitation in the defense in the run game. They built passing concepts off of that well. It all fit together well. So, given that this Bills defense can't tackle in the back end, and they're now going to be trying to tackle, Breece Hall and Justin Fields and Braylon Allen if he gets some more work this week, none of that is going to be as easy as I think people thought it was. And I was low on this Jets offense coming into the year. I didn't know what to expect, but I was very pleasantly surprised. I thought that looked real to me. That was like the Titans. That does not look like fluky to me. That looked real to me. I think that this team's going to compete. Now their defense, tough game against Pittsburgh, but the score is really, really skewed by a few things that happen, like the Jets fumbling a kickoff return and handing the Steelers the ball on a really short field, right? Like that, those things tend to make a difference, right? The DK Metcalf crazy catch, those things happen. I thought Sauce Gardner was really good competing against DK Metcalf and following him. Brandon Stevens was not so good. That was a problem. I felt like some penalties there. But I thought Quincy Williams and Jamin Sherwood really good at linebacker, just such great range there. I thought Quinnen Williams played really well. I thought that Will McDonald and Jermaine Johnson got after it on those defensive ends. I thought that, that they particularly, I think that both of them got Broderick Jones at different times, and then one of them got Troy Fatanu, the right tackle for Pittsburgh. I'd have to look it up to remember. I think it was Jermaine Johnson. I'd have to look up the notes to remember exactly who got who, but both of them, both Jermaine Johnson and Will McDonald, had big-time pass rush wins. Fatanu, I thought, was pretty steady for Pittsburgh, but they got after Broderick Jones and made Aaron Rodgers really uncomfortable. So I think there's a lot of good here with the New York Jets, and I'm excited to see them play. Much like the Tennessee game, New York's at home here. Buffalo's coming off this really emotional game, crazy win at the end. I would take the Jets plus 6.5 here. I'd stay away from the total. I think that, I would lean over, but at the same time, I could see this game playing out really slow because the Jets run the ball so much, and the Bills are ultimately a powered team that relies on the O-line and the run game. Josh Allen's legs, so I would stay away from it personally, but I was all over Justin Fields to be my fantasy quarterback moving forward in one league. With his legs, I think that, there's every reason to expect him to do that. Mason Taylor will be interested moving forward. Just the one catch in this game, if I'm remembering correctly, the play action and the seam up the middle. He looked good on that play. Really good ball from Fields, but see if his role expands. Obviously, need a little more volume than that. But right now, I think that fantasy-wise, Justin Fields, Garrett Wilson, Breece Hall in this offense all look like really strong plays in what should be a concentrated offense that should move the ball week to week because they're going to be a different look, and Justin Fields is just hard to play against when he's in an offense that's designed to his strengths. Talking about guys who are playing in offenses not designed to their strengths, and unfortunately right now Caleb Williams' strengths are very limited. I want to start with the good of Caleb Williams. He's a great athlete. He throws the ball beautifully. However, I think that what has gotten lost in the assessment of Caleb Williams, and I think it could very well be because he throws the ball so well and that distorts this, I don't think he's very different than Justin Fields was in year 2 in terms of just not seeing the football field in full progression reads. And it plays out differently, right? Because Justin Fields was so fast and he ran, but when you think about the things that Caleb has for highlight reel moments, like you take the rollout pass on the first drive last night where he just ropes that ball to Rome Odunze going out of bounds. That's all physical talent, right? And if anybody's questioning Caleb Williams' physical talent, I just don't agree with that at all. I think that he throws a beautiful ball. I think he's got a good quick release. I think that he runs well when he is decisive about where he wants to go, and his brain isn't there are times where you see him tripping over himself as he's trying to make moves, and you feel like his brain is just jamming, right? And it's just click, and everything starts glitching out is the way I think of it with Caleb, because it's in the moments where he seems overwhelmed mentally that you start to see the physical total breakdowns that are weird for somebody with as much athletic ability as him. Getting to why that's happening, I mean, it was really hard to watch the film, and I had been working during the game live, so I had the game on in the background, and I was seeing the highlights, and I was excited for Caleb and everything, and it seemed like things were going really well, and there was a lot of promise in the start on the broadcast.
But then you turn the film on and you actually see the concepts that we're developing down the field, and it's just tough. One thing that's very clear is the coaching point from Ben Johnson is we are not taking sacks, we are taking checkdowns. Caleb tried really hard to do that, and he did take a lot of checkdowns. The problem was he wasn't reading the concepts at all. I mean, at all, in my opinion. And there were basic reads coming open. I mean, the one that stuck out on early is DJ Moore is running a sail route into a cover 2 side, into the soft pocket in cover 2. So this is a great answer to a cover 2 look, is that you've got a receiver running a sail route into the soft spot. The safety doesn't really do anything to go match him, and Caleb doesn't even look at it. He's just in his own head. I think he scrambles on that play. I think he might have even made something good happen, but he's just making his life so damn difficult, and he's just not seeing anything. Like the fourth down at the end of that second drive in the Minnesota game, you saw him miss it on the broadcast, but you figure, hey, he's made some throws. You watch that on the coach's film. DJ Moore clears on this seam route and looks back. And as soon as he looks back, the ball should be on him. At this point, there's good 5 yards of air between DJ Moore and the deep safety, Caleb stares at him. The safety starts coming down on him, and then he throws it late and inaccurately. DJ Moore ends up getting hit on the play. The ball is uncatchable. And you go from what should be a very routine play and, frankly, an easy pass for an NFL quarterback to execute on a fourth and down situation where you got to have it. And, Caleb just kind of froze, and it took that extra 1 second maybe. But that's an eternity in the NFL, especially when you're looking where you're going with the play and the defense is reacting and moving. Then the 1 second is just so much more consequential. And we're going to see what happens with Caleb Williams moving forward here, but I am not encouraged. And I thought that getting back to Ben Johnson, I didn't think that he helped him at all. And part of this is Caleb has to get better at this stuff, but man, you felt like this guy just is trapped in the rigidity of what Ben Johnson wants to do, and his offense is so exact, and that worked well for Jared Goff with a veteran quarterback who had been operating from the pocket his whole career and needs to process like this and wants that sort of precision and rhythm. We'll get to the other side of this, that Lions were lacking in that some, but that doesn't mean that's going to fit Caleb great. And obviously you would like him to get there, but based on that first film, there is a huge gulf for him to cross to get there. And man, he looked uncomfortable. And then as the game went on, he starts spraying throws all over the place. I mean, I felt like he had a couple of throws that were like the Chuck Knobloch throw where, you're throwing from second to first and you put the ball into the stands. And, the DJ Moore throw down the stretch was one of those, but that one was at least a deep ball. I mean, he had a flat earlier in the game that he put well out of bounds. So I think that he ended up in his own head. I think that he's really trying and obviously wants to do these things right, but he's never played football this way before, and it's coming really slow. And if he continues to grind at it and believe in himself and do the right things, I think Caleb Williams is going to get there, because we see so many of these guys get there in year 3, year 4, year 5. But he to me looks like a long-term project. He just was not pro ready. He was not ready to play in the timing and rhythm that's demanded by the NFL game and NFL offenses, and it's going to take time. He has all the physical talent to be outstanding if he gets there, but it's going to take time. And the offensive line I thought was much better in this game. We'll be brief on these things. Jonah Jackson, I think the Bears brought a lemon in him. He did not look good in this game for them at right guard. I thought that was the one problem point. I thought Drew Dahlman was fine. I thought Joe Tooney was fine. Getting longer in the tooth. He's not as dominant as he was, but he's a good player. They were better there. Swift ran hard, I thought, but that Vikings defensive front is tough, and Javon Hargrave was getting after them some, especially. But yeah, Jonah Jackson, especially you couple in that Bo Limmer lost the starting center job to Coleman Shelton in Los Angeles. Whereas, and Bo Limmer was the one who Jonah Jackson couldn't get on the field in front of in LA. And at the time, the Rams just were praising Bo Limmer and saying, Bo Limmer's just a dog. Well, then he loses his job to Coleman Shelton, who is a very mediocre player. So that was, in my opinion, Sean McVay paying lip service to Bo Limmer, and everything they were saying about Jonah Jackson being a dog and just not having a spot for him
does not seem to line up with the performance we just saw. So I think that, Jonas had a lot of injuries in his career, and I think that's impacted him, because I think he did have some really good moments for the Lions. For the Bears defense, I thought that it's a good performance. They need to get Jalen Johnson back at outside cornerback. I thought that weakness really showed up in this game. That was just something that stuck out to me, is that they just did not have, you got Tyreek Stevenson on the one corner, kind of playing a different group. I'm trying to think who they kind of had out there. It was, you saw some Nick McLeod, right? And then, I'm blanking on who it was that it was Nashawn Wright that we would have seen a good bit of. And just, doing his best out there, but I did not think that they had the horses on the back end. Didn't think that the safety tandem with Kevin Byard and Jaquan Brisker was great. There was one play where Brisker, for sure, I felt like he was out of position deep, but I think the front is good. It's going to be a hard defense to play against, and the way that they match up with their defensive line, with some big guys up there, with whether it's Gervon Dexter or the ends with Dio Odenigbo and Montez Sweat, going up against a Detroit offensive line that has plummeted in terms of talent. This Detroit offense was obviously built around Frank Ragnow being an All-Pro center, and they still have two really good linemen in Taylor Decker, who's like Pro Bowl level, and then Penei Sewell, who's like an All-Pro talent. But man, the interior was not good this game. And Kevin Zeitler was their best guard last year. He's not there anymore. Graham Glasgow at center, just okay. And then, I thought that Christian Mahogany and Tate Ratledge were bad at guard. I think that they were two of the worst guards in the NFL in Week 1. Tate Ratledge, to me, he's a big guy, but I thought that he played with poor leverage, poor bend, and I thought that as a result, he's playing against guys who low man wins on the line, and he's playing against low man. And I thought Tate Ratledge was really, really bad. You hate to say that about a guy. Hopefully, he improves as his career goes on, but it didn't look like someone where he's just going to flip the switch to me. It seems like he doesn't have a good understanding of how to use his body to play guard in the NFL. And then Christian Mahogany, didn't think he was good. Did not think he was good. Green Bay has some good players on the interior, like Devontae Wyatt and Colby Wooden, and those are some of the guys getting after them. Same time, not Leonard Williams, and they got beat up in there. And this Detroit offense has been so based on that identity of being able to run the ball downhill on you and being able to out-physical you with the line. And they kind of lost that in this game. They didn't have that available to them. And then they also, my feel was that they just wanted to hit passes at a little bit deeper depth rather than some of their quick hitting stuff that they typically rely on. That can be hard to say in one game where you only have so many reps. That was just a general feeling I had about the offense in this game. Jared Goff, the mistake down in the red zone, it's just tough. Continuation of the way the season ended last year with all the interceptions against Washington. Down, you move the ball well on that drive. Pressure in his face from Micah Parsons. Green Bay's running a coverage rotation on the back end, so they're running inverted cover 2. So the safety was running down, player going out to the flat, and Goff just can't process the picture because he's got Micah Parsons in his face and makes the mistake there. So this Lions offense, I'm worried about them. I love seeing Isaac Tesla make that great play at the end of the game. I think there's still a lot of skill position talent, but this was a team that was built on that identity with Frank Ragnow in the middle, and now they don't have that. And Ben Johnson was great fit with Jared Goff. Whatever I just said about Ben Johnson's fit with Caleb Williams so far, and I don't know if this offense fits Goff quite as well. We'll have to see more games. Green Bay's defense is also really good. We understand that after the Washington game, right? But that said, I still felt that the guards were concerning to me. So we'll have to see how they do against the Bears. Flip side of that, I thought the Lions' defense was pretty darn good against Green Bay, all things considered. I thought that they competed against them. I didn't think anything was easy. Green Bay's got some really good players on offense, and Jordan Love is operating at a really high level. But, the Lions' rookie, Tyreek Williams, he stuck out to me big time. Like, that is a mountain of a man in the interior line. Maybe not as dramatic a debut as T'Vondre Sweat, because T'Vondre Sweat had some moments in the first few weeks last year. But I thought that Tyreek Williams, from snap one watching him, it's like, okay, you drafted that guy to be stout against the run, and I think he's going to do that job very well. So, I think that the Lions are bigger on the interior. That should make them tough. I think we'll see more and more from Aiden Hutchinson as we go on here. I think that the outside corner duo of DJ Reed and Terrion Arnold is a good pairing. And then I like the safeties with Kirby Joseph and Brian Branch playing full time safety now. And we'll just continue to see this. You get those linebackers out there. I like that Detroit defense. And I thought that they did some good things against Green Bay. Like, Green Bay didn't run the ball with will by any means. That was a complaint from Packers fans coming out of that first win against the Lions. And Jordan, they had some plays made on them, but this is the NFL in 2025, and that's just not realistic. So I think that I like the under 46.5 in this game between the Bears and the Lions. So sure I got that total right. I had the spread up here. And then I'm just. I think the Lions find a way to win this one, but I think it's probably lying about correct. Yeah, 46.5, 47.5. Like, I like the under. I think that we'll see how these teams rebound, but, I did not like the way I talked about the Jaguars and just seeing like sloppiness that is easily correctable stuff. I didn't see easy corrections for these teams. I saw a Detroit Lions team that needs to make roster acquisitions if they are going to be better on the interior offensive line. And just setting aside the talk about the coordinators turning over, I don't see the coordinator turnover as nearly as significant as the drop in talent they have had on the offensive line, because they were a top 5 unit the past 3 years on the offensive line with Ragnow in the middle. I thought they might drop to be like a top 5 to 15 unit losing him. Right now, I think they're a 15 to 25 unit with those guards, and that could obviously change quickly. Maybe they play better next week, but they did not play well this week, so we'll see. Like the under there, I think the spread's probably about correct, so probably wouldn't mess with that. So that's that, and hey, we'll see with Caleb Williams. I think we'll still continue to see his highlight reel moments, because he's got all sorts of talent, and outside of structure, when he's just seeing it and just playing, he makes some great plays, but he just doesn't get it from a mental perspective and a timing perspective. And playing down to down in the NFL, you can't just be playing backyard football. So we'll see where it goes. But I think it could be a longer learning curve than Bears fans want. All right, Seattle Seahawks and Pittsburgh Steelers. Yeah, let's talk about the side with a quarterback who has had a long learning curve. I thought Sam Darnold played a really, really good game for the Seattle Seahawks in his debut against the San Francisco 49ers. Frankly, thought it was a game where he had his teammates let him down in terms of some of the turnovers. I mean, the Seahawks were in the middle of a drive that would have given them a chance to push the game to 2 scores, I guess it would, or to push to the lead. I'd have to check what exactly it was, but Jackson Smith and Jigba ends up fumbling, and then the Niners take the ball back, and Purdy drives them down the field for the touchdown at the end of that game. But I thought Sam Darnold was sharp with the football. I thought he did a great job. It showed good chemistry with Jackson Smith and Jigba, who did well, having some sort of a presence outside and making some plays on the outside, even though he's not a big receiver by any means. But the issues around it, and that's kind of the funny thing now, is that Darnold for so long was such a dependent player, and in this game, I thought he was the steadiest thing about the offense, and I thought that he did well. The run game was hit or miss. I thought that they had times where they got rolling. I think that on the offensive line, I think Charles Cross and Abe Lucas both look solid. They've battled injuries, but I think that tandem could be good in time. They didn't run the ball super well in this game, but I thought Gray Zabel generally looked good in his debut as a rookie first rounder. I think that there's a lot of promise there. I was I had a very positive review on I think it's Jalen Sundell. Sorry, a lot in who names this week, but Jalen Sundell, second-year player out of North Dakota State, who lined up at center for the Seahawks. I was favorably impressed by him. I thought he was just okay, right? But he has better size. He's 6'5" than Oluwatombi. I think I got that name right. But the short center from Michigan, who I feel like is just a little too small, a little too unathletic, like just not quite there to be a starting center. I thought Sundell, his size was better. Anthony Bradford is not good at the right guard spot, so that's still a problem for the Seahawks. But I thought the line was better. It's a step in the right direction. I didn't think Cooper Kupp was real effective as a receiver. He had some really good moments as a blocker, but that's not necessarily what they need from him. Troy Horton got snaps. We'll see if he gets more involved as we go. But Zach Charbonnet gets the bulk of the work. I thought he was consistent. He's not as explosive as Kenneth Walker, but I do think Charbonnet's a good back. They need to continue to grow this offense around Sam Darnold. But I would say that if I'm John Schneider up in that front office and Mike McDonald and I'm looking at this and saying, hey, we wanted to reboot this team in our image, and I think that and build from here. I think that there's a lot of promise there, and I thought Darnold threw the ball really well. He was accurate, decisive, all those things. Thought he played very well. So I thought a lot of promise there. I didn't think Clint Kubiak called a very good game. I thought that there were some gimmicky plays that got in there, like they tried to run Jalen Milroe on the first drive out of the gate. They had a couple other things with, if I'm remembering this correctly, just some really sloppy screen setups and just a couple of designery things that I just thought were not great. I thought they did plenty of good things, but I did not think that this was a good game for Clint Kubiak. He was really the one coordinator in the league this week where I just felt like he did not do his players any favors. Some guys obviously really good weeks. Most of the time, you're kind of thinking it was fairly average. There's a very high bar to clear to call plays in the NFL or design an offense or a defense. Let's be clear about that. And while we do get some one-offs where you get somebody who's just in over their head or just wasn't qualified for the position, I'd say 98% of hires are very well qualified in the NFL. It's just a matter of whether they're going to be able to execute in real time, react and adapt when they're out on their own. So I generally don't sit there and say that I felt like there were a bunch of bad coaching games, but I did not think that Clint called a great game in this game for the Seahawks against the Niners. On defense, I thought the Seahawks were good. I thought that we see, unfortunately, the second round pick Nick Emonwari went out with what definitely looked like a hamstring from the way he was getting up. He went out almost immediately playing as their big nickel, so they moved Devin Witherspoon into the slot inside, and then Josh Jobe played a good amount of the game. I thought Jobe played, one of his better games in my assessment, and I had generally a pretty poor opinion of Josh Jobe, so maybe I was a little too hard on him. We'll certainly assess that moving forward. I thought he played better this game. Reek Woolen really wasn't targeted much at all. I guess he had PB late, I want to say, but he wasn't at the point a lot. I felt like San Francisco's strategy, and they were converting a ton of third downs on this defense early. They were just going after the safeties. I felt like they thought they had a huge matchup advantage on Kobe Wooden, on Julian Love, if they could get those guys set up. There was trying to think who the other safety who came in for Seattle early on was. I have to read through my notes, but they brought in another safety. He got targeted. They'd get manned up on them and try to work those matchups with the middle of the field. So I think San Francisco felt like they really had Seattle's number on that. The best defensive player in football this week, in my opinion, was Leonard Williams. He was not easy to deal with up front. Just absolute monster. He is so physical. I thought DeMarcus Lawrence had a really good debut for the Seahawks, had some really good moments. I thought him and Leonard were by far the best players in that front in this game. I thought they really stood out. Byron Murphy, I'm just not getting it in this defense. I noted multiple times where he's getting moved off the nose by a combo block, and he's getting pushed 5 yards down the field. And I'm not expecting you to, make the tackle when you're getting doubled like that, but we can't, in this structure where you want to play this 4-2 and have two deep safeties, you compare how this structure looks to how the Chargers structure looks and how those defensive tackles look. You can't be having your nose tackle get pushed 5 yards off the ball. It's just not going to work. And then, I'm just, it makes me sad to watch Devin Witherspoon play now. He was so electric as a rookie, and I just don't feel like he plays with the same juice anymore. And, I thought he missed a bunch of tackles in this game against the Niners. That stuck out to me. Yeah. One of those things where, sometimes you just love a player and then it just, something changes and, I don't think it's me, like in most of these cases, like a Minkah Fitzpatrick or a Devin Witherspoon. I think that the film is different, right? Because, I'm certainly not cheering for these guys to stop making plays and stop being electric. But when it goes out, at some point, you acknowledge it, right? All that to say for Seattle, I think there's a lot to work with here. And again, in terms of teams that set themselves up with a good runway for the next 3 years, I think they're in good shape. They're 3-point underdogs going into this game against the Steelers. I would take them to win outright. My model has it as a pick'em game. I think that this is going to be really tight. I think Pittsburgh has a bounce back game on defense. That Justin Fields offense had a really unique feel to it. Very hard to defend. I think there's a lot of good players on the Steelers defense still. And, Jalen Ramsey fit in well with them, didn't he? I mean, talk about bringing attitude at the end of the game. So I think they're going to be just fine On defense, I don't think that Seattle's as well equipped to get after them, so I think we see Seattle or the Steelers have a bounce back game in that regard. In terms of the Steelers' offense, I think that it's going to be a comeback to earth moment for them against the Seahawks. I love seeing the box score for Aaron Rodgers, but then you turn on the tape and it's not an inspiring offense. Like, they ran the ball some with some Arthur Smith feel to it, but it felt more like an Aaron Rodgers offense in a lot of these pass situations. A lot of flat routes, a lot of slants, and DK Metcalf caught that one that bounced off somebody this time. But Purdue fades, all the stuff with the Jets, and Rodgers had games like this last year, near the end of last year. We put up this incredible stat line, and then you watch the game back, and it's hard to say it's a super inspiring performance. Rodgers still has a great release. His accuracy is not nearly as consistent as it once was, but when the ball is on point, he throws some beautiful ones still. It's there's not a ton of talent, not a ton of explosiveness on this offense. I thought they were really, really lucky to win the game against the Jets. Rodgers almost threw a pick late that would have set up the Jets in scoring territory on just not a good decision, and he ended up driving them for the win, I guess, after that, and the 60-yard field goal. But, Boswell really helped him out there. So, I don't have any hard feelings for Aaron Rodgers, but or wish ill on him. But, turned on the film with optimism. Maybe Pittsburgh's going to be something this year. By the end of the tape, I felt like they're maybe a little bit better than they were last year. I think Rodgers is definitely better than Russell Wilson, but I don't think that really means anything in the grand scheme of things. Thought Fautanu looked good first game back after missing almost his whole rookie year with that knee injury. Had the one gap, one hiccup in pass protection I mentioned earlier that comes to mind, but that's going to happen. I thought Fautanu was good. Broderick Jones is not a legitimate NFL left tackle. His lack of balance in pass protection and his tendency to lunge and get out over his toes, he just gets worked. He gave up a bunch of quick pressures in this game, giving up inside spins. It just can't happen when you're the blindside protector, and tough deal. So I think that the Seahawks are going to win this game. I thought that the Jets or the Steelers were a team that were very fortunate to get a win in Week 1. And I think that the luck is likely to swing back away from them moving forward, or it seems likely given the makeup of the team. All right, moving along here. Let's see. We're still in the morning window, so I'm going to try to speed this up a little bit because I don't want to be sitting here for too many hours. All right. Yeah, well, here's a good game to speed things up on. 49ers Saints. Yeah, we're going to get Mac Jones at quarterback for the Niners, and George Kittle's out. So that's pretty damn disappointing because the Niners did a lot of good things. I thought Ricky Pearsall looked good. Made some plays down the field. I thought that Christian McCaffrey looked very good in his game back. Trent Williams, he's not invincible anymore. I think we saw that. Derek Cole bull rushing him. Definitely saw he doesn't just sit down on bull rushes against 100% of people in the league anymore. Now, Derek Hall is strong as all get out now, but nobody was doing that to Trent Williams before. Same time, he had some good moments. Saw some of his old trademark cutoff blocks, everything like that. So I think that's good. Dominic Puny looked very good in his first game of the season for the Niners in his second season in the NFL. I think those are good things. I thought Ben Barch fit in just fine at left guard. I thought the Niners line was just fine in this game, all things considered, and they played pretty well. I thought Brock Purdy played pretty well. Disappointing to get the injuries. The defense I thought was fun. Fred Warner is still just elite. I thought Renardo Green was very good in this one. Gave up a play, I guess, to JSN late. I think that's right, up the sidelines. But besides that, I thought Renardo Green was good. He got the Upton Stout in the slot, which allows Amador Lenore to play outside. I think that's working well for them. So, yeah, I think there's a lot of positive for San Francisco for sure. Nick Bosa is still a hell of a player. That was a really, really big play in the game. Thinking back on it now, when Darnold was drawing back, I guess, at the very end, and got his elbow hit, but ended the game that way. So, I think that the Niners got the Saints here. Hopefully they can survive this stretch because they should be a good team in the NFC West. And the Saints, it is what it is. I thought that they played really hard, and they've got some good stuff. Demario Davis on defense, he just continues to defy Father Time. I thought Demario was absolutely brilliant in this game. All over the place, kind of from the get-go. See him get caught by a lineman once in a while, and he's not, maybe he doesn't have the play strength to get off of those guys in those bad situations, but he still runs great. Played really well in this game. It was nice to see Cam Jordan get a sack out the gate. Just some more play instinct stuff rather than pure pass rush win for him against the Arizona Cardinals there. I'm trying to think back the exact nature of the play, but that was good. I thought Kool-Aid McKinstry was outstanding for the New Orleans Saints in this game against the Arizona Cardinals. I think he moves really well, challenges things well. Justin Reed at safety was a good player for them in this game. I think that they're a very competitive team on defense. We'll see if they hold up with injuries, everything like that. They didn't have Chase Young in this game. Don't necessarily have an ace pass rusher or a dominant defensive line, but they played Arizona tough. I thought, considering where this organization is, and on offense, it was unfortunate to see Talisi Fuaga leave the game at right tackle with an injury, because I thought him and Kelvin Banks were really good. Sometimes it makes sense when you see certain guys that they want to move position on the offensive line. Kelvin Banks is not one of them to me. I thought he looks like a keeper at left tackle. If I, again, getting back to how I'd rank him, one game is a very small sample size, but just looking at size, movement skills, the traits to play tackle in the NFL, I would have had Kelvin Banks ahead of Will Campbell as well. I probably would have had Josh Connerly ahead of him as well, as long as I'm going through a list of rookies here. So yeah, that's going to be interesting to see how that all works out for Will Campbell. But yeah, I thought that Kelvin Banks looks like he fits the part really well. Eric McCoy's a good player at center, and then Cesar Ruiz a good player at right guard. Dylan Radins is just okay at left guard while they hold the fort wall until Trevor Penning comes back. That'll be an adventure, because I thought in the preseason Penning could have gotten called for holding on 12 consecutive plays on the first two drives. It was spectacular. It was wildly entertaining, but I have no understanding of how he came to the conclusion that he's allowed to do any of that, because sure seems like if you could just grab guys and stop moving your feet and torque them around, everybody would be doing that. So anyway, Trevor Penning is his own guy, and I really do hope he gets on the field and plays guard in a regular season game, because I think it's going to be entertaining, and not in a good way for the Saints, but it could be bizarre. So that's for the future, though. I think the Saints team is going to be tough to play against. Got good talent at the skill positions, I think Rashid Shaheed did not look like himself coming back. You're talking about a video game joystick player, right? And coming off a major knee injury, so it could take some time here, but I didn't think he was showing the same juice. I thought Olave looked very good. Kamara played well. I thought Kendry Miller played his best game for the Saints. So, it is what it is for New Orleans. Talk about Spencer Rattler briefly here. He's not as overwhelmed as he was at times last year. I thought he overall looked calm and played the situation pretty well, but I think he's limited physically in the NFL. Obviously, whole new category you're judging it in the NFL. Rattler has a good arm for a college quarterback, but in the NFL, and start talking about guys who can really spin it, it's we're talking about a league where the top guys are like Josh Allen and Matt Stafford now, right? Not whoever the college quarterback of the day is. So it's a different discussion, and he's just not there. So I think that Spencer Rattler is going to be a backup quarterback in this league a long time. I think that this is a good opportunity for him to continue to show that in this situation. But I don't think that he's gang beaters, and I don't think that he's the better quarterback in this matchup with Mac Jones. So we'll see. This game is at 3 points now after the injury. It had been a 7-point game. So I would probably I like playing it to the total side, I think, in this San Francisco game, because I'm not expecting a lot of scoring there. So all right. Jumping forward, all right, and we're into the afternoon slate now. Carolina Panthers at Arizona Cardinals. So let's see. Arizona, we can go pretty quick there. Thought Marvin Harrison was better, bigger, more physical. Didn't seem to lose any speed with that, so I thought he was a better player in this game for them. I thought that Trey Benson showed that he's got some more juice this year, looks improved at running back. And Kyler Murray still kind of is who he is. Missing plays over the middle because he's too short, and then he's scrambling around and making life harder on himself. And, even against the Saints, just not a ton of rhythm to the game. So I think that they're just kind of stuck. They're going to be an entertaining team to watch, but I don't necessarily think they're a lot better, even if the defense does look better. And I thought that for Arizona, I really enjoyed watching Max Melton play. I thought he was really good in this game. Showed noticeable improvement from year one, and I liked him in year one. Will Johnson had a really good debut. Second-round pick from Michigan who fell in the draft for some different reasons. He had an interception taken off the board early because of a penalty away from the play. He had a good pass break up later, and then he absolutely hammered a receiver coming across late in the game. So a lot of positives from Will Johnson. I think you got to be amped for him if you're an Arizona fan. Carolina, I talked about them earlier. Run defense, god awful. This could be a good spike week for like a Trey Benson. Carolina's not good. Arizona could get a lead. You could try to see Trey Benson get a lot of work, so maybe that's a sneaky daily fantasy play. If you don't have him on your roster, probably very cheap. I'll have to go look at that myself. I think I might throw that in. And this Arizona defense is going to throw a lot of looks at you. And Bryce Young was terrible last week. It was kind of all the things, right? There was one incomplete pass where he, and it doesn't help that Ikem Ekwonu is out. Not that he's the best left tackle in the league, but he's a lot better than Josh Neiman. The play I'm thinking of, Bryce Young's looking to throw a wheel route, and Neiman gets bowled back into his face, and it was I want to say it was a man-free blitz. Whatever it was a situation where Bryce knew exactly where he wanted to go with the ball immediately. He wanted to throw this wheel route. And he throws it up the field, but because there's a guy in front of him, he can't get enough arm strength on it. And his receiver is open, but the ball is like kind of a big arc ball, and it's not flat enough, and it's not moving fast enough, and it takes longer to get to the receiver. That allows the defender to make up for it, and he gets the PBU. And so you see an instance where he knows what he wants to do mentally, and he just doesn't have the physical tools to do it. And then later in the game, he's rolling out, and he throws just this god-awful interception that just can't happen. The route gets cut off, and he gets picked, and then he fumbled in the game trying to scramble. He's so small. That was what I was worried about with all the scrambling last year. It's like, at some point here, he is going to get smacked with the ball. And, like, is he going to get up from that? And, I think that for all the promise Bryce ended with last season, this was a really tough way to start this season. And, I think he's ultimately kind of a low-end starter and probably a backup just because of the physical tools. And he does process the game well, but he's not, this is not like watching Cam Ward out of the gate, I would say. That's the easy comparison to make right now. Cam Ward, in his first game in the NFL, just saw it, and that's what you were hoping with Bryce Young. And we did see flashes of that anticipation and everything down the stretch last year. He had some good moments in the game later when things were out of hand, but just not great. And this Carolina Panthers team looks bad, so they might be at the top of the draft again here. I like Arizona to win this game. Got 44.5 point total. Don't have much of a take on that. Arizona is let's see, I think 6.5 or a 7-point favorite. I think that's fair. Probably not a lot of play on that game. As I say, I really like Marvin Harrison. Could be a tough matchup this week because for all the bad things I said about the Panthers defense, J.C. Horn is a really good player, and he could probably see a lot of Marvin Harrison. But yeah, we shall see with these teams. But Arizona, really good chance to get off to a 2-0 start with the slate they started with. All right, on to the Denver Broncos and the Indianapolis Colts. So we got the team that I was thinking I'd be really disappointed in Denver. I think that they played very well, all things considered. Bo Nix needs to clean up the turnovers. The 2 interceptions he threw, I felt like they're not full-on designer plays, but they are shot plays that are designed for him to get out with somebody in mind. He shouldn't have thrown either of those balls. There were, zone defenders who were sitting right at the spots that he was throwing to on those crossing routes. So, I don't think that's good. Obviously you don't want to just be predetermining your throws, and that's what it felt like. But for the most part, I thought Bo played well. Thought he had some really good throws on the move. He had one roll into his left early where he whips the ball into a small window. So a lot of positive there. He scrambled well, did those things. The offensive line I thought was really good. Quinn Menarez just being a beast as usual. Talk fantasy with the Broncos real quick. R.J. Harvey, as opposed to TreVeyon Henderson, R.J. Harvey I was expecting to have more of a pass-catching role. for the Broncos. Tyler Beatty had those duties in this game. Now, I don't think that Tyler Beatty locked down that job for forever with his subpar, in my opinion, performance in this game. They didn't have much luck at all getting him going in the short passing game, and it's also a really, really bad tell for the Broncos because when Tyler Beatty comes into the game, it is a huge pass tell. RJ Harvey had a huge carry on the drive that helped put them up by 8 to put this game away. He had a 50-yard carry on that, and then J.K. Dobbins ended up finishing off with a 20-yarder. I think that as we see Harvey get more experience, you'll probably see him incorporated more into the passing game because he is so explosive, and you love to be able to get him in space that way. Probably just not starting with that. He's, making a transition to a Sean Payton's offense, which is really detail-oriented, a lot to it. So that might take some time there. I would have RJ Harvey, if you picked him up for like a full PPR with the anticipation that he would be in that pass-catching role with J.K. Dobbins more as the handling the rundown duties. That assumption did not play out in this game, so I would be hesitant on playing him. Certainly not giving up on him. I drafted RJ Harvey on many teams. Thought the profile was very similar to TreVeyon Henderson. TreVeyon Henderson got the work in week 1. RJ Harvey did not. That doesn't mean we're not going to be saying something different in week 5. So, Harvey, he showed the explosiveness in this game. He put up a 50-yard run on a play that was critical for the Broncos winning this game. I think that does a lot more to earn you opportunities than anything Tyler Beatty did in this game. So I think that in time we'll probably see this shift. But the Broncos are in a spot where they can give it time. Courtland Sutton, really nice game. Made some big plays. As I mentioned earlier, I thought it was huge that L'Jarius Sneed got injured in this game because, Courtland Sutton just went up over Darrell Baker for that touchdown before the half. I'm thinking back on that, right? And Darrell Baker and Sutton was just better than him on that rep. So, I think that the Broncos, they met my expectations, I would say. I thought that Bo Nix was improved from last year. Obviously not his best. Not a game where he had an 100% hit rate. And as I mentioned, there were mistakes I think that you'd like to have back. But, I did not see this as a situation where Denver came out and just played absolutely terrible against a bad team. I thought they played a heck of a match against a tough Tennessee team. I thought that it was a slobber knocker on both sides of the ball, and the fronts are very physical for both Denver and Tennessee. Both the offensive line and defensive line, really, really physical groups, and it was a really fun game to watch, and I expect a lot from Denver moving forward. In this game, like that to translate to the under and the Denver side. We got Denver only favored by 1.5 on the road against Indy here, which is a different number than we were seeing last week, and that obviously has a lot to do with Indianapolis' performance against the Miami Dolphins, who I talked about earlier. I thought I saw positives from Indianapolis. I did not think it was overwhelming. I thought Daniel Jones was goodish, I guess I would say. Like, he was fine. He hit his passes, but I didn't think that he was like pinpoint accurate or anything like that. I thought he made a huge mistake that could have gone for a pick 6 when they had the lead in that game against Miami. I want to say, I'd have to look at the exact circumstances, but it's a underneath pass across the middle that got cut off when they had the lead against a Miami team that's not doing anything. And it was just, one of those moments where it's like, that is not a good play to have. And, obviously it didn't get capitalized on, but that's scary. I think that the Colts, Tyler Warren, talking to rookies here, obviously he's going to be involved a lot, and I think that he showed he's a really good player right out of the gate, very versatile, good pass catcher, does a lot of things for you at tight end. I don't know how many touchdowns are ultimately going to be in this offense. I think that our preseason expectations on the Colts are probably a lot closer to what they really are than what we saw in that Miami game, because that was just playing against a team that is an active dumpster fire. So, it's not to take away from all the players I like on the Colts. I thought Bernard Raymond played really well. I thought Braden Smith looked like his best self in a little while. I thought that he looked healthier. I thought Quentin Nelson had a really good game at guard. Really enjoyed watching him play this week. And then on defense, a lot to like. I think that, you saw Shavarius Ward step in, play really well for them out of the gate, which is great to see after everything he went through personally. Xavier Howard, I thought, played very well. And man, he has had some serious health issues since he left Miami, was out of the league completely. I was stunned when I saw him signing. The last I'd heard from Xavier Howard, he was, warning guys not to take the injections they give you because you're never going to be able to walk again if you do this. And obviously he was struggling and in pain right then, right? You're not saying that because you're bouncing around and running like you were when you were Xavier Howard was arguably the best corner in the league at one point. So, it's great to see him back healthy and, obviously, hopefully in a better state of mind. And I can't imagine, you hear about, you dream about being a professional athlete. I did growing up. And then, I get into my 30s and I hear about these guys who were the guys I thought had the dream, and they're getting these hip resurfacing surgeries. I'm thinking about hockey players in particular now, and guys who are every day getting out of bed and getting dressed. Is a tough thing because they played 10, 15 years in the NHL, and yeah, you lived the dream there. But getting closer to 40, I understand the downside to that. I think a lot more clearly than I did when I was younger, when I went in batted an eye at that. But anyways, good to see Shavarius Ward out there. Good to see Xavier Howard out there. Kenny Moore still a dog in the slot for the Colts. I don't think they're good at the linebacker spot, and I think that they don't have much depth on the line. I think that when you get into that second group, you can run on that group with the Northwestern guy. I forget the name, but the Combine Warrior who blew it up, the undersized guy, Adekembo, I think it is, getting moved off the ball again in this game. So we'll see. I think the Colts are a good, not great defense. I thought that, Lou Anarumo did a good job with them, and he anticipated a lot of the things that Miami was going to want to do as well, which gave them another, boost up. But it's going to be a much different test against Denver this week. So we'll get a measuring stick game here, but yeah, I still think that the Broncos are clearly the better and more talented team. At this point, I would probably lean Bo Nix over Daniel Jones at quarterback, although... So I was watching that Denver-Tennessee game. It's like, yeah, I'll take Cam Ward of these two quarterbacks at least. But I'll take Bo. I like the Broncos in this game. So hopefully we, continue to see that happen and RJ Harvey's role grow. All right, last afternoon game here. So we have got the Eagles at the Chiefs in a repeat of last year's Super Bowl. I mean, what more can you want, right? I guess you could want not Hollywood Brown, he is healthy. Xavier Worthy healthy instead of getting, clipped by Travis Kelce and knocked out of the game. That's no good. That's tough for the Chiefs. On the positive side for the Chiefs in that game, I think Josh Simmons clearly looks like he's got it at left tackle. Guy moves great, just really strong for his size. He's not like an overwhelmingly big, like 6'8", 360 tackle, but he is more than big enough, and he moves great. Good play strength. So that's going to be huge for this organization if he can stay healthy and be that guy moving forward, because, something I've discussed a lot is just the amount of resources they've poured into that spot. So, the Chiefs, we're going to see here, we'll have Jalen Carter coming back, after his inauspicious debut of the season with the Eagles, the Dak Prescott spitting incident. So he'll be back. I thought the Eagles threw a lot of bodies at the line. A lot of guys played well. Nolan Smith, I thought, was awesome. Jordan Davis thought he had his best game. Thought Moro Ojamo built on what he'd done. The kid out of Nebraska, the 4th-round pick. Hang on, I'm looking that up. Number 94. I thought that he just stood out as, one more guy that Philadelphia is getting something out of now who could keep growing into something more. Yeah, that's Ty Robinson. And then also 94, Byron Young. Now that I'm looking at the names, I remember him flashing a couple times. So, we'll see where it all goes. But, hey, you throw in, I thought Josh Uche made some plays for them with some speed off the edge. Zach Bond was freaking awesome. I mean, did not slow down at all. So, yeah, I think that Eagles defense is really good. Jahad Campbell had some really nice moments in coverage, getting down the field as a middle dropper. Now, in the run game, that was a big negative. He got taken for a ride by Tyler Smith when he's lining up as an edge defender in that look where he's the 9. He needs to get more physical there. That was a big welcome to the NFL moment, but he's got a lot of physical talent. Expect him to keep growing. Quinion Mitchell was awesome. Cooper DeJean was awesome. I mean, really good players there. They have to figure out the Adoree Jackson situation or the third corner spot, that outside corner in their nickel. You saw Cooper DeJean playing that outside spot in some of their base packages as the game went on against Dallas. But in that nickel, it was, Adoree Jackson, a good chunk of the game. Jacorian Bennett got a few snaps. It went pretty poorly, and then it was... back to Adoree Jackson, who was just getting beat up on pretty good. So I don't know if the Eagles are gonna have to trade for somebody at some point, but the tough thing for Kansas City is I don't know that they've got the receivers to really take advantage of that hole. So we'll see. I think that the Eagles, offense is the offense, right? Ran the ball really well. It was a run script against Dallas, so Dallas Goedert and Saquon Barkley and Jalen Hurts went off, and A.J. Brown and Devonta Smith had a quiet night, but we know that unit can turn it back on, and it'll be different guys in different games. And then for Kansas City, the defense, I think it's just getting worse and worse. I think it's just not the unit it was a couple of years ago when they were really a shutdown unit as one of the league's best. I thought Trent McDuffie was great in this game. Chris Jones is still contributing, but I don't know if he is really in the discussion as the best defensive tackle in the league right now, even if he's still, I think, pretty clearly in the top 10 to 15. I don't think that he's making the impact that, say Leonard Williams is making right now or Jeffrey Simmons is making right now. Nick Bolton had some really nice plays sorted out in this game. Again, this is not a defense that's bereft of talent, but I don't think it's as talented as it was a few years back, when you had L'Jarius Sneed out there and McDuffie could just hang in the slot. And so we'll see. But I think the Eagles probably win this game, but at the same time, Patrick Mahomes played really, really well against the Chargers. And, when that man's back is up against the wall, as it is in this one, and the Eagles already have a win in hand, I would just stay away from it and sit back and enjoy the game that afternoon. Sunday Night Football. Atlanta Falcons, Minnesota Vikings. Vikings getting a lot of primetime right out of the gate. Let's start with them. I just really, was impressed by J.J. McCarthy and the perseverance in that game. I didn't think on the film it was going as bad as you would have been made to believe on the broadcast. Like, obviously it wasn't going great, but he was dealing with some different stuff. You got Justin School playing left tackle. He was just a liability. So you got blindside pressure coming. You're struggling to run the ball early. He fought through it. And by the end, you're seeing a guy who's in the pocket. He's doing real quarterback stuff on that touchdown to Justin Jefferson. Subtle movement in the pocket, staying with your progressions down the field, playing the position right, letting the ball rip and being aggressive when you need to. And then we saw the athleticism on display on the keeper for the touchdown on the zone read look. So, I thought Minnesota had all sorts of positives in this game. I love Donovan Jackson at left guard. I think that he is, a potential all-pro out of the gate if he plays like he did in week 1 every single game. Like, I thought that Ryan Kelly and Will Freeze came in and both played to their high standards off of their respective injuries, both Colts coming over to the Vikings. I thought Donovan Jackson was better than those guys in this game. I thought that he was physical, and he's a big dude. He moves well. You can pull him. He can move guys at the point of attack. He was good in pass pro. I mean, I got nothing but positive things to say about Donovan Jackson, and really look forward to seeing Christian Darrisaw next to him sooner than later at left tackle. He's very close to being back from the knee. Once he's back, this might be, hands down the best offensive line in the NFL. I mean, there's some competition there, but that is a really good group of 5. Brian O'Neill is still balling. So really good group there. I thought Aaron Jones and Ty Chandler looked great as a backfield duo. Both have some value in fantasy with Jones having his pass catching role. I expect Justin Jefferson to just pick it up from here. And, it should just keep getting better for Minnesota. And, they've got a good opportunity here going up against this Atlanta defense to build on the way they finished that game against Chicago, because let's start with the positive on the Atlanta defense. I really, really like Xavier Smith, the I believe second round safety, but let me look that up. I forget what his draft was, but Xavier Smith, number 31 for the Atlanta Falcons. He is a really smart player. It sticks out in a big way. Xavier Watts. Okay, so 3rd round pick, and he's out of Notre Dame. 6 foot, 200, so not like some crazy athlete, but man, he gets playing safety, and having him and Jesse Bates both in the back end. I mean, you're talking about 2 really smart, really instinctive safeties. So I think that makes this defense a good amount better. I also really liked what the nickel Billy Bowman brought to the table as a blitzer, just physicality. Thought that he balled out some. What was unfortunate is I felt like got next to nothing from the rookie first round picks at pass rusher James Pierce and Jalen Walker, and didn't get much from Leonard Floyd. The veteran Arnold McCady is still just not doing a lot, and they don't get anything from the defensive tackles. They don't stop the run well. I mean, I thought Caden Ellis played well. I really like Caden Ellis and think that he's, one of the best pass rushing off-ball linebackers in the NFL, where he doesn't just have to run through lanes. Like, if he gets engaged on a lineman, he can quickly disengage. He's got some tools in his bag. I thought Divine Diablo honestly played one of his better games in his career. Former member of the Raiders, really fast, thin linebacker, who, has been more athlete than linebacker, I guess you'd say. Like, just not the greatest instincts. He's listed at 6 foot 3, 220. 225. So just, kind of a narrow guy. But I thought he played one of his better games. But yeah, they just don't have the pass rush juice, and I thought that showed up throughout. I thought Tampa Bay was able to protect really well. We'll talk about them in a minute, but man, I was so surprised when I turned on the film and Graham Barden is playing left tackle. It took me a minute to figure out what was going on there. It's like, I assumed he'd just keep playing center, but man, you talk about these guys with the versatility and the athleticism and why Graham Barden is so outstanding at center. Well, because he can kick up to left tackle, and you don't lose any sleep over it, at least against this Atlanta Falcons defense. So obviously, we'll talk more about the Bucs shortly, but yeah, I thought that was not great. So I think Atlanta's front still stinks, frankly, and the back end is better, but Mike Hughes was still got worked on by Emeka Egbuka. So it's not as if there's not holes in the back end of the defense. So, and then looking at the offense, I mean, man, how about Bijan Robinson and that run after catch on the little check down? I mean, he is a truly spectacular player. Now it's going to be interesting seeing this offense go up against this Minnesota defense that throws so much at you. Going to be an interesting test for Michael Penix. We saw him play a really good game here in Week 1. I think, two picks from the draft 2 years ago, and both these guys have shown they belong in the NFL. Penix has got such a great arm. Thought that his scrambling in the last game showed a nice element that people didn't necessarily know if he had. Obviously, good testing numbers as a runner, but his ability to stretch out, get the pylon a couple times there for the or a yard line marker for the Falcons was impressive and important in that game, and I think that's a good thing for him to build on. He threw the ball just really well. Got Kyle Pitts involved some. Got Drake London had the big game, and then Bijan does so much, for them as a receiver. So, we'll see. I think that this should be a really fun game. I kind of like this one to go over. I worry a little bit, as I say, about the Falcons going against this Brian Flores defense that's just so different. But I do like this game to probably go over. I like the Vikings overall because I think the defense is so much better, but two good offenses, hopefully. So hopefully this is a really good game on Sunday Night Football. And yeah, J.J. McCarthy, I guess, introduced himself to the world a little more. All right, we got the doubleheader on Monday night. Tampa Bay, really, really good, hard-fought win against Atlanta in Week 1 on the road against a division rival, gritting it out at the very end. Now, obviously, Atlanta misses a kick at the end of that game where they're going to overtime. That is what it is, but I thought that Baker, rallied his team down the stretch, played well. They say Graham Barden moving out to left tackle, that was impressive. They kicked Ben Barch into center, and then they brought Michael Jordan in at left guard, the journeyman, and they got by just fine. It'll be great for them to get Tristan Wirfs back, just make the offense that much better. But, I thought Mike Evans played just fine. He had A.J. Terrell on him most of the game, and, competed well against him. And Emeka Egbuka was amazing. Amazing as a rookie, and some of the comparisons to him, and I like JSN as a player, but I heard that comparison. I don't get that at all. Like, they're just different body types. Emeka Egbuka is a bigger player. He's got a bigger frame. He can run, man. Like that post route he caught for the go-ahead touchdown. He's moving. I think that he, I don't know how he he's first round pick. It's not like the guy was super underrated. I think the Bucs were even higher on him, but it's just kind of weird the consensus wasn't a little higher because. To me, that one's a pretty easy one. Like, good guy with good size, good speed, great hands, great football IQ was on display in this game. Just a smart player. So, yeah, the Bucs have a lot going on offense, and it's going to continue to be a lot of fun to watch. The defense, I thought Vita Vea was freaking awesome. I love Vita Vea. He's had quite the career. I thought Antoine Winfield played a good game for them. Atlanta's just, they are a good offense, and Chris Lindstrom for Atlanta. He's so good on, getting out on the move in the run game. He's not the best, blocker in a phone booth maybe, and maybe not the strongest straight up, but like, man, you get that guy on the move, he is a weapon. So yeah, I thought Tampa did fine against that, all things considered. They got something out of Hassan Reddick, so we'll see. I think it's a good Tampa Bay team, and it's such an interesting matchup against Houston because Tampa Bay's defensive line should dominate Houston's offensive line. Everybody should dominate Houston's offensive line, which legitimately might have 5 backups on it. Arianti Ursary, who the rookie they were raving about during camp, played terrible for them. I mean, it was Byron Young who was really getting after Arianti Ursary for the Rams. And Arianti Ursary gets pulled, and they put Blake Fisher back in at right tackle. He's no good. The left side of the Texans line is Cam Robinson and Laken Tomlinson, who have both been bad players in the NFL for the last couple of years. They're not good there. You got Jake Andrews, who's like a cast-off journeyman who won their center job. And, it's like Titus Howard at right guard might be the player that you're most excited about, and he's not that very strong guard. So, yeah, I mean, they suck. They suck on the offensive line, and it's tough to watch. CJ Stroud, there's a play in the second half where he just gets sawed in half by this guy, and he drills the pass to Nico Collins anyway, and him and Nico are still balling out. I thought Nick Chubb showed a little bit more than I expected in this game. There is talent around them, but man, is that offensive line bad. And I did not see like a significant improvement in the rules they were using or anything happen like that. I just saw a group that is frankly even less talented than they were last year. And yeah, it's really disappointing with how many good things are happening for this organization, how their inability to fix that position group and that position room, it's really gonna... It's tanking CJ Stroud's whole rookie contract, frankly. Like, this is year 3, and now, we're going to have to pay CJ Stroud, we're going to have to pay Will Anderson, and, you're in a situation where it reminds me a little bit of the Bengals, where, they obviously went to the Super Bowl once in that rookie window, but, like, you've got clearly the core, but some of the core pieces are cheap right now, and you're going to have to fill that in, and the inability to fill in certain areas while you do have these cheap pieces, it's just not great, right? Like, I don't know how you could say it is. Now, the flip side of that is that the defense is great, and I loved watching them play. We already talked a good amount about them in the context of the Rams game, but this Texans defense is nails. They play hard. They play fast. They can man up with, I think, anybody in the league. They've just got so much talent, and they play a really, really aggressive style. And with the way Will Anderson is playing, with the way Danielle Hunter is coming off the edge, it's going to be a tough day for everybody. So, I don't have a particularly strong view on this game here. The total has dropped 4 points from 46.5 to 42.5, which is I'm surprised it opened at that price is the thing. We'll see how it goes. I think that Tampa should win the matchup up front, but I think that Houston has enough talent at receiver that they can make some plays down the field. I think that, flip side of this, that Texans defense is going to get their shots, and I think that Tampa's going to get their plays, kind of like the Rams game. I think that there's some similarities to be drawn there. We'll see. I think this should be a really good Monday Night Football game. It'll be fun, but right now, like, the Texans very clearly have the worst offensive line in the league. It would be difficult for me to come up with another candidate that is even in the league with them. Like, maybe Miami is that bad. Yeah, I guess I could say that, but it's a short list, man. All right, last Monday Night Football game, and then we calling this a show here. Chargers at Raiders. How good was it to see a fully healthy Justin Herbert again? I felt like it been a year and a half, and this game, the first 5 plays, it really reminded me of, oh man, like, even with all the good things Justin Herbert did last year, he was a shell of himself. And I think you saw better velocity on the ball. You obviously saw him moving around way better in the pocket and evading and running. That last play of the game where he gets up the sidelines for the baseball slide, he was just on point with the ball all night. Had the one miss to Ladd McConkey on what would have been a touchdown on a release by Ladd vertically, but outside of that, I felt like every ball was dead on the money. Dead on the money. As opposed to, like, when I'm talking about Daniel Jones, he did hit his throws and everything, but, I felt like it, if we're talking about, target shooting or something like that, which I have more experience reading about than doing, but I think it's a pretty simple point. Where's the target grouping? Is everything right in the middle of the head, or did you hit the full face, right? I felt like Daniel Jones more full face, just kind of, it's all there, but it's not what Herbert did, which is just bullet after bullet in the same exact hole, right? I thought he was fantastic. Ladd McConkey looks really good. Keenan Allen is good. He didn't have a bad year last year, and he was in a horrible role for his skill set, and now he's in a great role for his skill set. Quentin Johnson fits in great as the X-receiver because, this staff doesn't ask him to run change of direction routes, which he was so bad at as a rookie. And you're just seeing his confidence build with his hands, and he's catching the ball more consistently now. I think that he's a clean-up player in this offense. He's not going to be the primary look, but with Ladd and Keenan Allen doing what they do in the passing game, that's okay. I thought Joe Alt was amazing at left tackle. Amazing. I think he was the best left tackle in the league this week. He is just so big. It shows up in the run game, and he's got such great balance and bend, as opposed to what I was saying about Tate Ratledge earlier. Joe Alt's like 6'8", and he's sitting down so that his and it's, it's not like he's leaning. He is sitting down. His shoulders are up. He's got great posture, and it looks like he's at the point where his arm, if he were to reach out to these pass rushers who are way shorter than him, he would reach out, and to get his hand to their shoulder, you would be parallel with the ground, which is what you want, right? Because if you're 6'8" and you're trying to point your arm down, well, basic, I won't even call it physics, just the basics of if you ever used a compass as a kid. All right, well, if I'm going down and that angle is changing and it's not parallel, well, I'm not reaching as far anymore, right? So if I can get low and be moving smoothly with my feet and everything and have that extension parallel to the ground, then I'm maxing out my arm length. Joe Alt already has really long arms. He doesn't need to max it out, but he is. And he's phenomenal. I love watching him. Thought that this Chargers line was generally good. The Zion Johnson and Bozeman, I kind of feel like it is what it is. I thought Becton had his good moments moving some things out in the run game when he was not on the sideline for this one. He'll get healthier moving forward or get in better condition moving forward and not be dealing with the illness. So nothing but positive things to say about the Chargers offense. They look really good, and Justin Herbert's the maestro of it all. And, Omarion Hampton, not the best game right out of the gates, but thought he was fine, and we'll see where it goes going forward. One guy I did love right out of the gates is Ashton Jeanty. He lost a bunch of yards at the end of the game trying to run out the clock against New England, but he had some good carries early, so don't let that box score fool you into thinking that he actually was popping off 2 yards on every carry. I mean, I think he had 5 yards for 5 carries for maybe loss of 5 yards. It was terrible. I'd have to look at the sheet, but they were trying to run the clock out. He had a run for a touchdown down at the goal line where, man, talk about a bulldog, just hitting the pile, and he's low to the ground. He's not a tall dude anyway, and then he just keeps churning. He's a lot of fun to watch. This whole offense was fun to watch. Geno Smith is a blast to watch, right? Had one inadvisable throw, but he'll have those. Spun it all over the field. The touchdown to Trey Tucker, I mean, that kid with his speed and his release, he looks like a young Tyreek Hill. He's so damn explosive and everything like that. He's got to, keep working towards governing it all. I thought Dante Thornton was good out of the gate. He had a pass broken up on him late by I think it was Trent McDuffie, but I thought he was pretty good overall for a rookie. He brings good size on the outside. Jacoby Myers does so much well for them out of the slot and just catches the ball, generally pretty reliably, although Jacoby did have 2 drops in this game that were, in my opinion, uncharacteristic for him. And then Brock Bowers is a dude, I did think that the Raiders' offensive line was pretty disappointing against the Patriots. I was hoping for more out of that group. I thought they had played fairly well down the stretch. Solid, not great. I thought Colton Miller was, typically his good self, but I thought he was really the only good lineman they had in this game. I thought TJ Glaze was shaky at right tackle. I think Austin Powers Johnson, frankly, looks fat at right guard. And last year it was that too. He looked completely out of shape to start the season, and then he was obviously too amped up for the first game because he completely overexerted himself, and you could tell he was hanging on for dear life in that first game. It did get better as the season goes on, and maybe that happens again, but I thought that Powers Johnson was not good at guard in this game. He was one of the worst guards in the league this week. He would be on that list with those guys from the Lions for sure. Then I thought that Dylan Parham also had a rough day. He was not good. You could stick him right there. Jordan Meredith, I didn't have much to say about the center so much, but it was just not. And I didn't expect this unit to be gangbusters or anything, but I thought that they'd be steady. I didn't think they really were. I thought they were a little bit below average against a good Patriots front, admittedly. So we'll see how they do against the Chargers, who also have a very good front. The Chargers play such a sound defense structurally from the top down. It'll be fun to see how that matches up against the Raiders offense that definitely wants to throw the ball down the field and be aggressive with it. So, flip side of it, it's worth saying that while the Raiders defense got reasonably good results in the game score-wise against New England, I think the field conditions played into that a little bit. They are bad on defense, right? They've got Kyle Blue Kelly playing one corner across from Eric Stokes, and he was not good in this game. Not that you would expect him to be, but you should be able to throw all over this Raiders defense. They just do not have the horses at cornerback, and they don't have the guys at safety to cover up for it. Max Crosby continues to be absolute monster, game wrecker, all those things. I think that Jonah Laulu is a good player, ascending player, but as a whole, this unit is just really lacking talent. I think that the problems at cornerback, them and the Miami Dolphins, their outside cornerbacks situation is just, tough compared to the rest of the league, and I think that's going to be a problem. So I do like the over in this Chargers-Raiders game. With that being said, with the way Geno Smith will go after you, and he's not going to quit, and then Herbert is just humming. I don't see how, against this bad Raiders defense, if Herbert comes out and plays the way he did against the Chiefs, I mean, he might throw for 5 touchdowns. We'll see. He was really good, and the Raiders, just don't have the horses. So that's it for the rundown. Hopefully it's enjoyable for some people out there. I sure like listening to myself talk about this, I guess. That sounds terrible, doesn't it? But I enjoy all the film, and it's nice to kind of process everything I saw and put it all together. It's all spinning around in my head, once I see it all. So hope that you enjoyed the show. Obviously, hey, subscribe, anything like that if you want to keep hearing it. If I continue to scream into the void, that's fine with me. I'm having a fine time right here this afternoon. But hey, if anybody listening has any questions, suggestions for the show, more than happy to accommodate that. Otherwise, I'll keep doing the show my way. But would love to. I'm probably going to do the pod the next couple of weeks. I'd love to do a video article where a written article with videos of some of the clips in it. I think that's a little more compelling than listening to me describe all these plays while I'm sitting here. But I also have a day job and everything like that, and a lot of film to watch every week. So only so many hours in the day, and hey, this was a fun way to wrap the week up. So I hope that anyone listening enjoyed this, and hopefully back next week. And if you're not, I guess I will be. So hey, thanks a ton, everyone. I hope that you had a great time watching the NFL this week. Oh, and I'll just briefly touch on that Commanders Packers. Let's call it a day. It's been a long one, but Packers defense is really good, huh? I'm looking forward to seeing Keyshawn Nixon's tape. It looked like he had some nice PBUs. Looks like he's coming along. DJ Reed had a similar story as a corner, starting as a kick returner I think he was cut by San Francisco, then he kick returner for Seattle, got some run as nickel corner first, then he played well, played an outside corner, and has turned into a really good player. So maybe Keyshawn Nixon follows a similar path there, and obviously Micah Parsons fits in well for the Packers. And Commanders, disappointing day. That defense is not good. It did not look good against the Giants, and it did not look good against the Packers for sure. So that's kind of knew that going into the season. Expected the offense to be able to prop them up a little bit more. So we'll see moving forward. I thought Washington had a good first week on offense. Obviously, last night's result would indicate that wasn't the case, but hey, I'll watch the film the next time that we're back, and we'll talk about these teams in the context of their next game. So, all right, really am wrapping up this time. Thank y'all.